Hi everyone, welcome to our Community Energy Conference of Practitioners being held in collaboration with Power to Change and their Next Generation Energy Programme. I'm Emma Bridge, I am Chief Executive of Community Energy England. For those of you who haven't come across us before, Community Energy England was established by community energy practitioners to provide a strong, unified voice for community energy, particularly with government, industry, but other key stakeholders as well. So our vision is for community energy to create an energy system that is democratic, decarbonised and decentralised, but where people are also put at the heart of the energy system. So in order to achieve this, as a sector, we will need to adapt to new business models and engage proactively with an increasingly complex energy system and range of partners, while still holding true to the core principles that are at the heart of community energy. So to support this, we at Community Energy England advocate on behalf of the sector and work to influence policy and regulation based on the feedback from and discussions with our members. We bring communities, businesses, local authorities and experts together to help drive innovation and to foster collaboration. We share good practice, opportunities and challenges, and we gather data, such as through our annual State of the Sector survey, at events like this, and through conversations with our members to drive our activity and to ensure our ongoing impact. So we are at our very essence collaborative, aiming to add value and avoid duplication. And so we work with a range of networks and associations, some of which you can see at the bottom of this slide, and also with our strong membership base of 250 organisations. You can find out more details of what we do, and if you're not already a member, join to help make our collective voice stronger, and you can do that through our website, which is listed at the bottom of this slide. So on to today's event, which as mentioned is in collaboration with Power to Change, but also the Next Generation Community Energy Programme partners, Bristol Energy Network, and supported by C.H.E.E.S.E consultants. So the aim of this event today is to share learning on the practical issues and opportunities arising from emerging business models, so to help community energy enterprises avoid the hurdles, challenges and pitfalls that others before them have gone through. The first part of this session highlights key learnings from Bristol Energy Network, who are celebrating their 10th anniversary, so congratulations to Ben. I'll then be handing over to Mary Anderson from C.H.E.E.S.E Consultants to chair the rest of the event. So as well as leading on the evaluation for the Next Generation Programme, Mary also has 25 years expertise in sustainability, energy and importantly community engagement. So I'm sure we'll also have lots to add alongside the speakers. So Mary will be leading sessions on domestic rooftop solar, electric vehicle charging points and heat pumps. We aim to finish at 4 o'clock, but we will leave the room open afterwards. So any of you that want to hang out afterwards and have a chat, please do so. And also, if you're not interested in all the topics, feel free to dip in and out. You can see the timings on the slides, and also John sent you an email earlier today as well. We do want this session to be interactive, so please do use the chat functions to ask questions, but also to share your experiences of your opportunities, kind of your challenges, your successes as well. We've got behind the scenes Charlotte, John, Duncan and Ben, who will be keeping an eye on the chat and collating questions to help Mary out in the discussion sessions later. And we will be sharing the slides, and we are recording the session, so if you do miss anything, you can visit it afterwards. We have built in plenty of discussion time in Mary's sessions, but our first session is very packed, so we may not have much time for questions. So speakers in session 1, can you please keep an eye on the chat? And then after you've spoken, just have a look, see if there's any questions you can answer in that function as well. And if there's anything pertinent coming out of the chat, we will share that with all delegates afterwards. As I do know from experience, it's quite hard to keep a handle on what people are saying and the chat at the same time. So without any further ado, we will start session 1. Each speaker has 5 minutes, and be warned, I will be strict with the timings. And up first, I'd like to hand over to Caroline Bird, who is chair of Bristol Energy Network. Oh, and you're on mute, Caroline.
Okay, sorry, I did that a lot earlier as well. I'd like to share my slides if that's possible, please.
Sure, yeah, let's do it.
So hopefully you have something which says Ben is 10 on your screen. And as Emma said, we're really happy to be.
Just to interject, we can't see, it's not full screen, so it's quite small. We can only just see the slides in your notes in one corner.
Oh, sorry, I shared the wrong one in that case. I've got 2 different ones up. Let's try again. Is that any better?
Yeah, perfect.
Brilliant. Okay, great. So I guess what I really wanted to do is just to say, you know, it's great that we've made it to 10 years and maybe to celebrate a bit of what being a network has been about for us, kind of where we came from and why we think being a network is really important and has been of great benefit to the city, I guess. So, you know, when Ben formed back in 2010, the world was different. The Climate Change Act had just been signed. The peak oil report in Bristol had just been published, and we felt, or the communities of Bristol felt, there was a need. There were a number of neighbourhood energy groups set up across the city. We had Bristol Green Doors initiated some green eco homes events. We had 2 renewable energy co-ops, and all of those led us to think that actually a network was a great way of getting together and sharing some experiences and learning from each other. This is something we're really proud of, our Bristol Community Strategy for Energy that came about in 2013, just before the National Community Energy Strategy. And actually all the things that we said in that strategy back in 2013 are still really relevant today. You know, how we build community resilience, how we help people understand behaviour, how we develop energy efficiency and low carbon technologies, renewable energy, and the economic benefits of all of those things are really important still today. We were European Green Capital in 2015, which is a great using our profile. That kicked off a number of different projects, some of which you might hear about in a minute. Beyond that, we recognised that engagement was a really important thing, and to engage beyond community energy groups, to engage different communities across the city. And the Bristol Community Energy Fund was one way that enabled us to do that. We've brought in different funding, or we've worked with the City Council to bring in different funding from different sources, and we've worked with them to widen our reach right across the city to try and engage with diverse populations in the city. We're still growing. We're involved in different projects now, right up to this year, with the City Council, with the Centre for Sustainable Energy. We're developing our own projects, working with our members across the city. We've held all sorts of events over the last few years. We've had conferences. We've worked with students, school students and university students in the global climate strike last year. We work really closely with our members through open meetings, which we've been doing, you know, every year since we started. We've got a website, we've got newsletters, and we really try and do things that are of use to our members. And our members are a pretty diverse bunch, really. They do, you know, thermal imaging, solar panels. One of our members has developed a wind turbine, I think you'll hear about in a bit. Some of them hold film nights, others host speakers. We've got microgrids. You know, between us, we can kind of cover a lot of bases in the city, and we can learn from each other through these. So, you know, we've got another 10 years to hit this 2030 target. It's really important that we work together, that we collaborate, that we scale up the ideas that we've got. Bristol City Council was the first city council to declare a climate emergency. And we're really proud that that's what we're doing as a city. So I think that might be just about where I hand over, just to summarize really that these are the things that as a network we think are important: to be the network, to communicate and bring people together, to support our network of members, to build capacity, to help new groups develop, to represent our members across the city and beyond, and to strengthen what we do working together. So that's a real skip through kind of what we are as a network, what we've achieved and where we're going now.
Brilliant, that's great. Thanks, Caroline. I am handing over to Amelia next. Amelia, have you got slides? Or?
I don't have any slides. So I'm the coordinator of the Bristol Energy Network, and I started in July. So it's been a bit of an interesting time to start a new job. But I have been involved with Bristol Energy Network for many, many years, probably pretty much from the beginning. And one of the things that I'm doing is coordinating the network of energy champions, and those are people who are embedded in different communities within the city, kind of communities that aren't specifically focused on energy or sustainability. And we've been running some really nice trainings online. We've managed to run 3 sessions training energy champions on how to support people to switch their energy supplier so that they can get a cheaper energy bill, and how to access a warm homes discount. And we've been doing that with our partners, Centre for Sustainable Energy, as part of the Warm Homes Advice and Money project. But it's been quite challenging for those volunteers that we've trained to find ways of actually connecting with people and implementing their skills. And you know, it's a kind of double-edged sword in a way, that the pandemic has meant that more people are really struggling with their energy bills, but on the other hand, actually reaching people to support them and to help them find ways of, you know, reducing their bills and yeah, being able to deal with that situation is more challenging. So I think one of the things that might be really actually something to discuss within the whole of Community Energy England is how to do that kind of outreach work, which historically Bristol Energy Network has been very good at, going to lots of different events and festivals and community fairs with a stall, and going to a coffee morning, or things that people go to in community centres, and saying, hey, this is what you can do, this is how I can help you with your kind of supplier switching, I'll come back in 2 weeks' time, bring your bills, I'll sit down with you next to me with my laptop and we can go through the process together. All of that is not really accessible. So we're thinking about social media strategies, we're thinking about how to have little videos that we send out through WhatsApp, how to, you know, we've set up an email address which we're making posters and flyers that we send out through various different networks, including like Children's Centre or food banks, or through befriending schemes in different parts of the city, so that people can email us and then we can kind of do a phone back rather than cold calling, because we don't really want to ring people up and say, hey, we want to have your bill details and so on. Yeah, I think that's kind of it. We're also doing a lot of work with volunteers and continuing to work with the university with student interns. So there are some aspects of that engagement work that are easier to do than others. I'll leave it there and hand over to the next person. Thanks.
Great, thanks Amelia. Yeah, that'd be really interesting to explore more, I think, in terms of kind of best ways to engage now. And we have, I think, John has just produced how to run events online for anyone who is interested as well. But looking at that broader engagement would be great. So I have Dave Tucci next on my list to talk about an update from Ben and the success of his wind turbine so far.
So basically, Bristol Energy Network, as Caroline outlined earlier, and its members are doing amazing work, and Bristol Energy Cooperatives currently got a share offer open at the moment. Please do have a look at that, and that's about extending some of the community energy models they've been developing with the Neff and Weir project, and also a project they've got happening in Lawrence Westing as well, which is around microgrids. And I could go into a lot of detail about all of those projects, but given the time, I want to just focus on the wind turbine, which is our recent success in Lawrence Weston. But just to say that there will be further updates in the new year for the C.H.E.E.S.E project, because there's some big news about how we're developing that project going forwards, and thermal imaging being at the front of all retrofits. It's what we're aiming to demonstrate needs to happen through BEIS and Ofgem and other partners that are looking at how best to do retrofits. So really pleased to be working with C.H.E.E.S.E in Bristol and Future Proof to deliver retrofits. But I will press ahead with this project because it's quite a complex one. The Ambition Lawrence Weston is one of those communities that Amelia mentioned that typically isn't represented in the community energy sector, but were engaged with us in 2014 in a fuel poverty workshop. And we've been working with them ever since with our membership of Bristol Energy Cooperative, developing a solar farm in 2016. And then they were kind of, and also the C.H.E.E.S.E project, all of the thermal imaging work has been, training has been done there. So what next? In a pub, Mark Pepper and Roger Sabido suggested they would like to develop a wind turbine that they own themselves. And I said, I do know a wind engineer, Dr. Charles Scown, who's mentioned there, And so we set about putting a strategy together as to how we might facilitate that to happen. And this youth centre is also a hub for education. So we wanted to create a way of creating more green jobs coming forwards in the future, will tackle ending fuel poverty. That's the vision, to create tangible benefits, mobilise community finance and enable training. And what do you need for a project of this nature? You do need the wind resource to be there. We knew the turbines there already. We have to validate that, identifying the planning route and getting the all connection. I could go through all of that, but I will they'll be shared around later, these slides. You can read these at leisure when it's on YouTube again. So the history up until now is there has been a good fit rate, but this was being done at the same time as the written ministerial statement had come out, which meant that the planning rules had changed, but also there was no benefits in terms of fits or any other being offered for community onshore wind. So we applied to Community Energy Fund, C.H.E.E.S.E fund, and that's to develop that strategy and to look at how we might achieve planning. And so we looked first at the written ministerial statement and looked at ways in which we could encourage our local authority to adopt suitable sites in their local plan. But that wasn't due for renewal for a while, it was just becoming up for renewal. We looked at the neighbourhood development plan, and we'd already completed one in Lawrence Weston. So it was going to take too long to develop a new local plan. So we kind of looked at this in more detail, found that there were examples where turbines been approved since there was since this ministerial statement had come through, where there wasn't sites identified. But so we were in the process of almost considering doing a micro neighbourhood plan with just one policy, but we kind of as we were developing this process, I'm going to flick through these slides because I appreciate how little time I've got. I'm going to send these slides round so there's more detail, so you've got more time to go through them. So what was critical in the written ministerial statement is the evidencing of community support, and by hosting events and engaging with the community to get their support for this project idea, we were able to bring about a body of evidence to show that the public supported this project. At the same time, Accolade Wines proposed a wind turbine project, and we supported their application with our community engagement evidence, and that was successful. And it was noted it was only successful on the basis that the community support was there. So your support as community energy practitioners in developing these projects is really crucial for delivering a successful project. So this is us back in 2016 after the solar farm, asking those questions, encouraging people to get behind the project. It led to the updating of the community plan that we did cover community energy. So it's different to neighbourhood development plan. Community plan isn't has no material planning consideration, but it can be evidence for what the community wants. And I recommend this route as a good place to start with your local authority, discussing how they might look at existing. So what we found with the Accolade Wines project was that there were existing policies within the local plan which supported onshore wind. That, alongside the evidence and the evidence for our community plan, showed that there was enough support for onshore wind in the places we were looking at. So taking that forward, and after identifying sites, working with Bristol City Council, we're able to undertake our next stage of the project, which was funded by Bristol Community Energy Fund, which is a loan fund which Richard will talk about shortly. That allowed us to get the business case up to the point where we could actually then take it through to further funding and work with other funders. And Power to Change were a crucial partner in this point, because there was a funding gap that we needed to support this project, and the Power to Change sandbox program that allowed us to carry through to make this project happen. So without all of these funders working together and collaboratively, we would not have got the planning permission that we worked through. So yeah, once you've identified your site and you've gone through all those processes, you need to go through and follow the policy guidance to make sure you actually fulfill the evidencing of your community engagement role, and that's crucial into getting your planning permission. And then yeah, I'm whipping these slides are for so yeah, so if your local authority is considering developing its own local plan, there are examples like Hull where there are areas identified. There are other examples, so do come and talk to us about some of those examples, or C.E.E.S.E. But yeah, so don't be put off. The written ministerial statement isn't something to be too scared of. You just need to approach it sensitively with the communities, bring them on board. Lots of people have declared climate emergencies, and find your local authority officers, people like Richard Lowe, who will support your project, and James Sterling, who will support your project and help you to navigate with you. So it is that partnership between you and your local authority to create gain agency. And creating a community plan with your community that involves community energy is a great way of involving the community. So have that vision with your community, get the right project delivery team in place, apply for funding, and get the local authority on board, planning team on board it very early, and get that feasibility funding in if you can, so that Rural Community Energy Fund is available. C.E.E.S.E no longer exists, and there's no such thing as a Bristol Community Energy Fund, but this is the time to really be asking BEIS and other funders to actually think about how they can structurally support community energy sector, because this is not a simple, it is a complex. I'll go through these slides. I'm doing another presentation tomorrow, much more time to give you much more.
Yeah, Dave, 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's it. Without great partners, you can't deliver these projects, and so it's all about collaboration and making it happen. And that's it. That's all I say for now.
Brilliant, thanks, Dave. And I'm sure, say on behalf of everyone dialed in today, well done. It's fantastic to see community win. So yeah, congrats to you and to everyone who's put so much hard work into it. And when Dave has had time to take a breath, we will be working with him on sharing that learning in more detail with everyone as well. And so next we have Richard from Bristol City Council. Richard.
Good afternoon, everyone. I could have loaned David a minute if you'd needed more, but
had a couple of extra.
I'll crack on. Yeah, so I'm an officer at Bristol City Council. I'm in the energy team, and been there 7 years. And my role with the community groups in Bristol sort of really accelerated around the time of the Green Capital year in 2015. The council did receive some funding from central government, and part of that we started developing a best practice programme to just demonstrate how councils and community groups can work together. So we set about putting together a number of schemes for that partnership, and we did have a conference for other local authorities in 2016. I'm not sure whether this event today has any other local authority officers on it, but there's certainly been some significant learning since that conference, and happy to talk later to anyone who wants to know more. But just to sort of skim over the top of how we managed that programme and some of the lessons we learned. So it was quickly apparent that we wanted a partner, and Bristol Energy Network came on board to work across the city. And one of the things we wanted to do was bring as many groups together, not just the existing energy groups, but to bring a diverse range of non-energy participants. So we put a grant scheme together where groups could apply for up to £10,000 to promote energy in their sort of hyper-local areas. And so, yeah, we awarded grants to around 45 groups in the end. But the way we did that was to put out 5 competitive rounds, so that, you know, groups had to demonstrate how they were going to best spend that money. And we appointed a panel of diverse third sector and energy specialists to review and come to decisions on who to award money to. So yeah, I mean, I'll just quick list of some of the recipients of that grant. It was really amazingly diverse, like I say. So we put PV panels on a play bus. There was a older people switching group, there was a church group, there was debt assistance for fuel poor, there was new energy training for volunteers at a food bank, there was interns at a community centre, and then there was a number of technology projects, microgrid feasibility, LEDs. So yeah, a long list of really great projects. And so the key role for the Energy Network really was to go out. They listened, they encouraged, they inspired groups to think about projects in their area, and then they followed up to discuss success and draw up the case studies. And all of that's available if, like I say, anyone wants to see some of that. And then in parallel, we put together some loans for really experienced energy groups. So you've already obviously heard that a wind turbine is really in the offing, which we're super excited about. But there was other things. So certainly solar PV on council rooftops was another loan that we awarded, and these are contingent loans. So should the project be successful and the feasibility works that we have funded lead to construction, then we will look to get a repayment on those loans. And one thing that is worth mentioning is that a lot of these energy projects are being delivered on council land and buildings. And you'll find in a lot of other parts of the country, you know, the council is a major landlord in that area. And what's really difficult for a lot of energy groups is really to identify the officers or teams in the council where they can really work closely with and get good engagement. And so these projects have really led to relationships developing, and David, you know, has worked tirelessly to make that happen. But it really needs to be a two-track street, and the council officers, you know, with day jobs and very busy and diminishing resources, also need to feel engaged in the success of these community projects. And I think, you know, it takes a long time for that to happen, but, you know, it's really sort of showing fruits of delivery now, and a number of solar PV projects have been delivered already, and hopefully the wind turbine will in the future. So, you know, without that slug of government funding, that probably wouldn't have happened. But what we'd like to think, and this is kind of looking forward, is that councils that have signed a climate emergency will see that even a small amount of funding can open up a huge amount of participation in their area and get that energy conversation going. So it's, you know, it could be small beer in the great realm of spending and lead to some really fantastic results.
Great. Richard, any last points before? I just want to make sure we've got enough time for James.
Yeah, no, I've rounded up, Emma, so I'll stop there. Thanks.
Fantastic, thanks Richard. So on to James, also from Bristol City Council.
Perhaps, thank you. I've got literally 2 slides to share. One is my name, and the second is my name and email address. So very, very exciting stuff. So I'm James Sterling. I'm the Communications Engagement and Partnership Manager for Bristol City Council's Energy Service. And I think, as you've heard already from numerous speakers, the council is, or Bristol as a whole city, is very much a driving force behind the energy movement, and a real kind of pioneer in terms of delivering kind of impressive, life-changing and transformational energy projects. We were the first city and the first council to declare a climate emergency, and we're incredibly proud of that. We know that sort of despite the investment that we've made as an organisation, so now over £60 million since 2012 into sustainable and renewable and kind of essentially clean energy projects, we know it's simply not enough to address the climate emergency and to tackle the challenges that are coming down the line. So we look at a kind of new way of delivering for the city, a new way of decarbonising, a new way of creating a fairer, more kind of localised and more democratised energy system for Bristol. And we look at partnership as a way of doing that. So we've in the process at the moment of establishing a new partnership, so a partnership between the council and the private sector, so an organisation or a consortium of organisations to work together to deliver over £1 billion worth of investment in the next 10 years into our energy system. So this is huge levels of investment, the like of which we've never seen in our energy system locally, and the like of which that the council could really never find down the back of the sofa. So we see it as a unique opportunity and something very, very exciting for us as an organisation, for our communities and for the people of Bristol. We're in the process of a procurement exercise at the moment to identify that future partner. And we've been engaging alongside this procurement process with Bristol Energy Network and a consortium of community energy groups across the city, including other city partners like Bristol Green Capital Partnership and the Future Economy Network. And our efforts there are really to ensure that we are building a future partnership and a future delivery mechanism that is inclusive and enables community organisations to really play their part. We've always been really, really clear that actually decarbonising the city is, as you can understand, an enormous task and a huge challenge. It simply won't work. Whatever solution we come up with simply won't work without the community involvement. So without involving local people, without supporting local groups, and without giving people a meaningful say and a meaningful stake in the projects that we deliver. This is really about ownership. And when I say ownership, I don't simply mean having a kind of a seat at the decision-making table. That is really, really important. But this is also about the ability to own assets for the future, to actually own those parts of generation for the new kind of cleaner, greener, healthier energy system that we're trying to build. So we're building on a lot of good work and a lot of really good collaboration with local community groups. Our view is very much that community energy is integral for the future transition and future decarbonisation. So we are doing everything that we can to kind of build that in and make sure that it's absolutely a foundation for the future energy system. So so as I say, I can't say too much about the procurement because we're right in the midst of it at the moment. But what we can say is social value is really, really key within that, and within that decision making process for us to identify that future partner. I think we've made it abundantly clear that the community energy is very much a kind of Bristol thing that's here to stay. So that's all from me, really. I have obviously contact details there if anyone's keen to get in touch, and obviously a link to the City Leap page as well, where you can find out a bit more information on the project. But thank you. And I think, is it question time?
Yeah, I think, thank you so much, James. And yeah, really nice to hear those sorts of words coming from a council. Lots of learning there to share, I think. I think in terms of time, what I think we should move on to the next session, but I am very aware that there was a heck of a lot of learning in that and a lot of information given in a very short amount of time. And we've only touched the tip of the iceberg with what's going on in Bristol at the moment. So if people are interested in learning more, Dave and Caroline have put links to the onshore wind event tomorrow, case studies, the toolkit. If people would like an event looking at this in more detail, a bit longer as well, do let us know and we can look to facilitate that. A couple of other shouts. John Taylor was promoting Rural Community Energy Fund as a pathway for if you're interested in onshore wind or other types of technology in the chat. And also Plymouth Energy Community are crowdfunding for a mass participation art installation at the Climate Talks next year. So please do keep using the chat, do post questions. If you do have any questions for any of the Bristol speakers, do put them in the chat, and I hope you don't mind, Dave, Caroline and everyone, if you can just kind of answer in there, and we'll gather anything as well and try and answer them for you afterwards as well. So again, yeah, thank you and well done to everyone at Bristol. So I would like to now hand over to Mary for the next session, which I think, I've lost my list, but I think it's domestic rooftop solar.
That's right. Thank you very much, Emma. Fascinating to hear about all that inspiring activity in Bristol. So the next 3 sessions are sharing learning on innovative business models for post-subsidy community energy. And a lot of the experience we're going to share comes from the Next Generation programme, the innovation project supported by Power to Change through the Next Generation programme. But there are lots of other innovative projects out there, so it's not limited to what's happening within the Next Generation programme, and you'll hear speakers and people contributing from the panels from other innovative projects. We're going to look at 3 topics. The first one is small-scale solar, then we'll move on to electric vehicle charge points, and finally heat pump work. The reason for choosing these 3 are that they're the ones that there've been a lot of internal discussion about the practicalities, the do's and don'ts within the Next Gen programme, and we thought it would be interesting to take those discussions a bit wider. So in the first one, looking at small-scale solar, I think this is a particularly challenging area to make small-scale solar viable in a post-subsidy world, but it's a big prize because of the potential links with household energy behaviour, awareness of energy issues, and so on. So I'm going to hand over now to Chris Stuart-Bennett from Lockleaze Loves Solar and Gill Fenna from the Burneside Community Energy Group, who are going to tell you what they've learnt about what does work as well as what doesn't work. So over to you, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Just to check, are you all seeing the large screen, or are you seeing my notes at the moment?
Large screen.
Excellent, good. Good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate Ben and Bristol City Council on their successes that they've just been telling us about. I should warn you all that what I'm about to say is a little less upbeat. We've spent the past couple of years, we being myself, David Saunders, who is here in the audience, Suzanne Wilson from Lockleaze Neighbourhood Trust, and my fellow Low Carbon Gardenia Director, Bob Langton, investigating how we can make residential solar PV funded by community energy organisations a financially viable business model. And as you will see through the coming slides, we've hit a few obstacles and it's been a challenging couple of years. So first off, to give a bit of background on what we wanted to achieve with Lockleaze and what sort of assumptions we were basing our modelling on. The broad aim was to find an area of Bristol that was relatively deprived, suffering from fuel poverty, and try and work out a way of providing solar panels which the residents of the properties could buy the electricity that's generated by those panels from at a lower price than grid, and export any surplus to the grid, thus making a model which would break even at the very least, but ideally generate a profit so that it was self-sustaining and less susceptible to risk. David had already conducted a project installing some 20 or so solar roofs in the area, and we had historical data proving that we could get about 950 kilowatt hours per kilowatt installed on those roofs. So that was a nice definite assumption we could base on for our generation. And we had indications that we could get solar panels installed, admittedly, if we went large and put 5 kilowatts on a roof, at about £650 per kilowatt installed. Recent developments and newer quotes are suggesting that actually this figure is more like 750 if we're really lucky, but this was the number that we based our modelling on to start off with. We also assumed that the occupiers of the properties would use at least 20% of the solar power that was generated by the panels. That's average across the year. Obviously in the summer they'll be using less because far more is generated, in the winter they'll be using more, but 20% self-use was a figure that we felt was probably fairly reasonable based on standard utilisation patterns. Obviously the past year has completely thrown that out the window because most people are working from home and consumption is much higher during the day now. We also modelled based on a 5p per kilowatt hour export rate and no fit on these projects. 5p is now looking possibly a little optimistic. It's now in the high 4s for most exports, and also being able to fix this for the lifetime of the project, so some 20 years, that is pretty much impossible at the moment. And we were assuming a standard grid electricity price of about 16p in order to calculate savings against owner-occupiers' bills. The initial intention was to sell the electricity to the residents at 9p per kilowatt hour, which made it a fairly compelling offer. You're taking about 2/3 off the price of power there. We had conversations with Bristol Energy, which obviously because of their situation are no longer proceeding, where they indicated there'd be about a 2p per kilowatt hour administration charge that would need to be added on. So the residents would in effect be paying about 11p per kilowatt hour, and we'd be getting 9p of that from our for the income, and that was factored into the modelling. So those were the basic numbers that we started trying to design our project around. The plan was to stick about 1 megawatt of solar on about 300 houses. Obviously, if we could get more than 3.3 kilowatts per roof, we'd do that, and we'd need fewer properties. Equally, if 450 properties wanted to sign up, we'd look at doing 1.5 megawatts. We weren't bound to those numbers, but that was the order of magnitude that we were aiming for. We had some preliminary conversations with the council, but they had their own schemes that Richard's already mentioned, and City Leap meant they wanted to keep their options open for things that could be done in the future. So fairly rapidly, our pool of potential roofs started to dwindle as the council said that we couldn't use theirs for the scheme. We had some conversations with some host social housing organisations, but unfortunately timing didn't really work for those. One of the schemes was fairly far down the planning process. They had contracts signed with their builders, which would have cost an awful lot of money to break and change over the PV supply to us rather than with the construction companies. And the other organisations that we spoke to were so early in the process that they weren't really willing to consider it within our time frame, because this being Power to Change funded, we were within a certain time window in which we needed to get this work done. So we then started looking at privately owned properties, and it became apparent quite quickly that these become fraught for different reasons. Privately owned rented properties, so where you have a private landlord who then rents out to another group, well, person or people who are living in the properties, you end up with your customer being the occupiers, because they're the ones who have got the arrangement with you and the energy company for the billing, and they are free to change their energy company at any time should they so wish. But your lease is with the landlord, who needs to be shown some reason why it's of benefit to them to let you have their roof. Also, with the relatively high turnover in tenants, you end up having to renegotiate the customer base within these properties on a 1 to 2 year basis, which has additional cost and makes the financials of the model a lot more complicated and a lot riskier, because you can't guarantee that you're going to have your 300 or so homes at any one time. You may lose, well, up to all of them if you're really unlucky. And the way that we decided that you could try and improve that customer retention was through excellent customer service and low prices. But you can't guarantee those things. So you're looking at a lot of risk if you're dealing with rented properties because of the split customer model. So we then effectively abandoned those for the time being as being too difficult and started just looking at owner-occupied properties. It's less complex because you are only dealing with the owner-occupier for both the lease and the energy purchasing. It's moderately less risky because they are more likely to stay for longer periods of time. However, you do have significant legal costs because you're having to negotiate leases with individuals rather than a landlord who may have 5 or so properties, or a council or a social housing organisation who've got hundreds of properties. And you have to have a lease because if the owner-occupiers have a mortgage, they need a Council of Mortgage Lenders compliant lease to allow you to have the panels on their roof. So that legal cost does fairly rapidly push up the initial capital cost of the scheme. Because you're also dealing with other people's houses and their roofs, as well as funding this as was intended through a member fundraise, which is what we were going to organise through Local Moreno, there's a lot of due diligence and best practice that needs to be followed in terms of ensuring that your members' investment is at least reasonably secure. They accept some risk, but you don't want to be too cavalier with what you're spending their money on, and you also don't want to put the customer's property at risk either. So you have to start considering things like O&M contracts for your scheme and insurance, and all of these fairly rapidly, on top of the finance costs of paying interest to your investors, add up to make community-funded small-scale solar very difficult to justify financially. The other problem that we had, which was more ideological, is that once we'd settled on really only offering this to owner-occupied properties, we'd moved quite a long way from the power to change goals of providing something that could be available to anyone within the community, and with a particular focus on addressing fuel poverty. Whilst some people may be paper rich and money poor, on average, someone who owns their property is probably not in fuel poverty. So, constraints. If you have the cash and you own your own house, you can get about a 10-year payback if you install solar on your roof, because you don't need to worry about, you don't have to, if you don't choose to, worry about things like O&M and insurance for your panels. It's really you, your roof, and because there's no lease, you don't have to have legal discussions either. So, at the moment, if you haven't installed solar on your roof, do so. Community funded solar requires, and I've mentioned some of these already, finance. We don't have the money immediately available. We need to raise it, whether that's getting a loan from a bank or going to our members and doing a fundraise. And that involves interest payments back, unless you happen to have a wide base of rich philanthropists who want to just give you the money. If you can do that, brilliant. Start putting the money out there, putting the panels out there. Legal costs, as highlighted. Customer retention and billing, I've alluded to. With the billing, now that Bristol Energy is gone, technically at the moment there is no energy company which provides a commercial billing system where you could charge a property for solar power they've used. Octopus are working on something, but it isn't even in the testing as a pilot scheme phase yet, from the conversations I had with Bridport Energy Local the other day. That may come through sometime early next year, at which point Octopus will have a bunch of organisations beating their door down. But for the time being, this isn't something that can be done right now. Insurance, both for your panels and for the properties that you'll be installing them on. Operations and maintenance to ensure that they continue generating at the levels that you require for the financial model. And then the ongoing administration and support, because you are going to be the point of contact for tens, hundreds of people who may have questions about their energy bills, may have questions about their panels, may have a friend that also wants to do this. And so you need to factor in that additional cost to have someone available on a long-term basis to cover this. And then repairs and replacements, because entropy doesn't stop even for community projects. We were modelling a 50% inverter replacement requirement over the 20-year lifespan of the scheme, but also panels generally don't break, but you can't guarantee that. Wiring can get nibbled by all those lovely things that live in our houses when we hope they're not there. And so you need to factor in the costs and the administration and the staffing to go out and do repairs as required. So from our modelling, the best case, and this is it literally just breaks even, assuming nothing goes wrong, we'll have a payback of about 20 years. If you end up with customers exercising their rights to change suppliers because they've been offered a better deal, or if you end up with far more inverters breaking earlier on than you'd expected, but outside the warranty period, you're looking at more like 25 to 30 years payback, just raw cash payback, not allowing for changing cost of capital, of about 25 to 30 years. So then we started thinking about what were the triggers at which point we would think these schemes would work.
Chris, if I can just interrupt for a moment, you're slightly more than halfway.
Okay, that's great. I'm nearly at the end of my bit, and then I'll be handing over to Gill shortly. So if we could get PV systems that could be installed at £450 per kilowatt installed, including everything, so that's all the mounting, scaffolding, labour, certification, so the MCS, all of that, and or we could guarantee that the average self-use over the year would be greater than 30%. And batteries are a way of addressing that, and we have started modelling batteries recently, but even that is coming in a little more expensive than we need it to be for this to work. Or we could guarantee a 25-year export rate at 5.5p, which doesn't exist at the moment, or someone would just give us the cash, then we could make it work. But at the moment, we're not quite at any of those thresholds. And so you would need to effectively accept that you were going to lose money on a scheme like this if you wanted to do it. Now, that's not to say that that's not a laudable thing to do, a price to pay to ensure there's more solar put out there in the community, get people to start believing it or seeing it as a normal thing to do, and thus try and drive community-based climate change mitigation. But it's not a business model at this time, which was what we were tasked by Power to Change to try and identify. However, not all is lost. There are some possible glimmers of light, which Gill will talk about some examples of in the near future. But there are some scenarios where we believe it could/should work. First is, if your council isn't already on this and doing it themselves, if you work with councils, you then once again sort of have the two customers in terms of leaseholder and energy consumer, but it's a lot easier to deal with a council who have a lot of properties and have one single point of contact than to have to deal with lots and lots of small points of contact. So you may achieve some cost savings there and also be able to include some of the maintenance into the standard maintenance schedule the council's doing. So if you're not in Bristol where they're already on it, have a conversation with your councils, you may be able to get this to work there. Or if you can time it just right with social housing or co-housing organisations, and this is what Gill will be talking about in just a second, if you can get it in the beginning, then it will work. Equally, if you can find schemes that have unused marginal land nearby, it is much cheaper and easier to install a moderately sized solar array on the ground and then do a direct wire feed to a microgrid and provide the solar that way than actually trying to put it on the roofs of the properties. I accept that not every housing development happens to have a conveniently located piece of marginal land, but if you can find it, that is the easiest way for community energy to get involved in funding solar energy for residential properties. And now I'm going to hand over to Gill Fenna, who has a couple of other slides that she wants to talk through. Gill, do you want me to just click through your slides for you?
Yes, please, Chris. And you slightly said what I was about to say, because that's all right. Because what we have been doing really is trying to avoid the problem. So I've got a couple of examples of things that are working on or have worked on in the Northwest. The first one is Burneside Community Energy, just outside Kendal in Cumbria. and we have been running for 5 years now and have already invested quite a lot of money into solar panels on the roof of James Cropper, which is a paper mill in the village, and bought some solar panels for the village school. So the project that we are now working on with Next Generation is trying to supply low carbon or zero carbon energy to a new housing development that is due to be built in the village. This has already been in the local plan, and we started looking at it about 3 years ago as to what would be a sensible low carbon option. So there are about 125 new homes that are due to be built. We are in the fortunate position that the landowner is a founder member of Burneside Community Energy and heavily involved in and interested in zero carbon energy. He also is the chairman of the paper mill, so there's a bit of a theme going on there. BCE is now an integral part of the design team for this housing development, having been pretty much written into it as a demand by the landowner. So there is a developer organisation, Igloo, who will be the main developer for the site. But one of the criteria is that there must be a community energy, zero carbon energy supply to it, and there will be no gas connection to the development. So the no gas connection was a great start for us, because it does mean that we have an electricity-based energy supply, and we can generate electricity locally. So we have got the opportunity there. 65% of the homes are going to be for private sale, and 35% of them will be social rented. And there is a local social housing provider who is becoming part of the development team.
Jill, can I just say two-minute warning?
Okay, so we are aiming to put in quite a complicated energy system in so that we can supply electricity and heat to the homes. So that will include electricity storage, as well as heat pumps, and we're possibly looking at heat storage as well, and we'll be putting in EV charging. So it's a difficult system technically, and the only way that we can make it work is on a private wire. So that then allows us to sell electricity at the best value we can get, marginal savings possibly against market rates, but realistically we're not aiming to give the householders a great big saving on their electricity bills. And we need to do a huge amount of modelling to optimise the amount of local generation that we can actually use on the site. But as Chris has already said, there are significant issues that we are coming up against on actually putting PV on the roofs of the houses. We were aware of these before we started. We've started looking into them in more detail, and they have been raised as issues by the developer and the landowner. And these are around how saleable the houses are if there is solar PV on the roofs that is owned by somebody else, and the quite considerable costs associated with doing due diligence around that. So for the moment we've decided not to put PV on the roofs of the houses themselves, because we have some communal facilities that we can use, and there is space next to the development to put ground mounted. So basically we are, as I said, we are avoiding those issues. And still trying to supply the energy to the homes, but not actually using those homes' roofs. Excuse me. So that's what's going on in Burneside. Given that I've got no time left, I'll quickly talk about Lancaster Co-housing, which is a project that Morecambe Bay Community Renewables did 8 years ago now. So More Renewables owns nearly 100 kilowatts of rooftop PV on the roofs of individual houses, and those houses are privately owned. However, again, it's fed into a private wire alongside supply from the hydro scheme, and we sell everything to the co-housing co-op, who then sell it on to the householders themselves. So we are not responsible for any of the billing or managing the import and export on that. The things that make this work is that it's a co-housing development, and anybody who lives there has to sign up to membership of the co-op and to payment of the charges. So it gets around some of the issues about how do you manage the billing and how do you manage retention of customers because of the setup of the co-housing itself. So people who live there are paid a service charge, pay a service charge, which includes standing charges for the energy system and metered energy use. So this is, it's another workaround really. I think I'm fairly clear that individual community-owned solar systems on people's homes isn't a model that works at the moment. So what we're trying to do is find ways to work around it and alternative ways of supplying to domestic customers rather than trying to push up for a business model that doesn't work right now. And that's all for now.
Thank you very much, Gill and Chris, for sharing the difficult bits as well as the workarounds, the ways through. We've had some interesting comments in the chat, with Tom Broughton saying, what about solar together, bulk buy solar PV and battery scheme? I'm going to call on somebody who I know is in the panel. So our panel consists of not just Gill and Chris, but also Liz Warren from Frome Solar Streets, Frome Renewable Energy Co-op. And we've also got Sonya Bedford from Stephen Scown here to give a legal perspective. So Liz, I know that Frome Solar Streets is kind of close to a bulk buy model. It's kind of it's on owner occupiers houses, but with support from a community energy group. Do you want to just say a few words about that?
Yes, thanks, Mary, and thank you for inviting me to join the panel today. I will whistle-stop tour. Frome, many of you may know, is a town of about 25,000 people in Somerset. We're gloriously placed between Bath and Stonehenge, so that's where we are. FRECO, the Renewable Energy Co-op, started in the mid-2010s with the same kind of business model and ideas as many of you will have had, based around feed-in tariffs, and did 2 medium-sized installations on local public buildings. And we then went into the same existential nosedive that probably many of you did as well, where we ended up having this kind of ongoing discussion, debate about the economics of PV, of solar PV, in the light of collapse of feed-in tariffs coming down. And we kind of lost the purpose of what we were trying to achieve. And as Chris said earlier, actually there's this bigger thing about just trying to get some solar panels on some roofs. So we breathed a very strange sigh of relief early last year when feed-in tariffs just went, because it meant we could actually just stop talking about them. And we could try and identify a way of reaching out to people around domestic rooftop solar that wasn't all caught up in the incentives that you could or couldn't have anymore. So we said, well, okay, in a subsidy-free world, what do we do? The Smart Export Guarantee Scheme was only just starting, so we didn't even talk about that either. It's like, what can we do in a subsidy-free world? Well, let's see what we can do in terms of getting a good price. And we spoke with some local installers and said, okay, fairly standardized system, 4 kilowatt system, what's your best price for multiple installations? And we put that out as a challenge to local suppliers. And a local company came back and they said, well, okay, we think for a fairly standard system, which we can scale up and scale down because it's modular, where we've got bulk purchasing, so multiple buyers at the same time, so we can get basically a discount, wholesale discount, where those installations are all local and locally clustered, so the installers aren't having to travel and in kind of a rural, semi-rural area, installer travel can take up an awful lot of a day. So if you can combine a bunch of installations in one town in a week, that makes it very efficient. Handily, the installer also owns a scaffolding company. So he was able to do himself a very good deal on scaffolding. And then was able to craft a deal whereby they would add on batteries or EV charging if people were interested at a sort of separate price. That was just negotiable. And a lot of behavioural advice about how to really maximise the use of the energy you're generating at home on site. So the price they came back with, which felt ridiculously good this time last year, I don't know if it still is, or a year and a half ago, was £3,750, including VAT. That was significantly lower than we thought it would be. We were thinking sort of 4.5 maybe. And so we sort of said, we being Freco and Frome Town Council said, actually, okay, we support this. Let's put some marketing effort into this. And we said to the installer, well, how many do you need, you know, really, to unlock this price? How many installations are you looking for? And he was very flexible. They were very flexible and said, well, let's see what we get. I think he probably regretted that for a little while when we got the first dozen or so, and he suddenly kind of, okay, is this going to work? Last year we did 70 from nothing between April and December last year. For each of those, £50 gets donated to Freco for our community fund. So we were able to part fund some more PV on our local YMCA. We also realised that it was geared towards people who have £3,750 in their savings or in their behind the sofa, wherever they keep their money. So we linked up with a local community lender to offer they offer energy efficiency loans, but they were able to extend that to loans for PV at usually about 4% interest rate. So that was how we sort of crafted it together. It's not a commercial model for Freco, it's a kind of fundraiser. It generates some goodwill. We are not part of the relationship or the contractual relationship between the customer, the installer and the energy companies. That's entirely over there. But we felt it was important to show that a market could grow on its own, really. Separately, we've been exploring new developments, microgrids, we're looking at community wind turbine and all the kind of things that people have been talking about. So I'm so glad to hear that there's progress on many fronts, but that's what we did with Solar Streets.
Thank you very much, Liz. I'm kind of watching the chat, and I can see some questions being posed to Gill, but they've been answered in the chat. Tom Broughton and John Taylor have been asking questions about Solar Together, a different bulk buy. I think it's a different bulk buy scheme, saying, you know, is it good? Seems to be good value for the PV panels, but maybe not for the batteries, and it doesn't always employ local installers. Liz, is there anything you can say about that in terms of how it compares to what you've been doing?
So it looks like it's a separate scheme, and it looks like where our pricing is probably more aligned with Tom's local installer rather than the Solar Together one. I will say I know that Southall in Nottinghamshire have been looking at a Solar Streets project based on the kind of, like, the Frome approach, and the price they got quoted was less than the price we got quoted, but obviously they're looking at installers based around Newark and Nottingham, and so I think there will be some variation in prices just because there may be regional variation in labour costs, things like that. But we were very clear, our installers are based technically in Wiltshire, not Somerset, but they're based 6 miles away, so you know, we were very clear that was going to be a key part of what we were looking for.
Just a quick comment on the even the local installer prices. Assuming that 14 panel array is 310 watt panels, you're still looking about £850 per kilowatt installed, which is above the financial break-even point for this model.
Thank you very much, Chris. Sonya, I wanted to direct a question to you on behalf of the presenters, in terms of looking at the legal issues, the kind of mortgage issues involved in getting solar actually onto people's houses. Do you have any magic wands or any advice on what they could be doing?
No, unfortunately, no magic wand. I think Chris pointed out exactly right that the process is standardized now for privately owned homes that have mortgages on them, and through the Council of Mortgage Lenders who have a specific solar lease requirement, and nearly most traditional lenders are signed up to that. So at least there is a standardized process. I think some of the good news around that is that I've been dealing with or helping my colleagues in the office who deal with residential conveyancing over the last sort of 15 years since we've had feed-in tariff leases, and a lot of them were very shoddy, so they didn't do the community energy market a lot of favours. But we are now seeing initially they were devaluing properties, and one of the things with the sort of mortgage lenders handbook is that if it's found that having a solar lease or having the solar is affecting the sale of a property, then the bank can request that solar is removed. And so we were trying to change the attitude of estate agents and valuers around good solar leases on buildings and on domestic properties, so that it actually increases the value, which means that the process in itself is much easier. Because we had this backlash of a lot of bad feed-in tariff leases, and now my biggest tip, if you're going down the lease route and it is expensive, and as Chris said, will knock costs up on the project, is to completely standardize everything. Don't change it, and to make sure that the domestic homeowner isn't disadvantaged. We can't really look at things like compensation clauses in the same way that we used to. So we have to model for communities without those, because that will have a knock-on effect of the value of the domestic property. Lots of other hints around leases and licenses, which I can share in the chat or later. And just want to pick up a couple of triggers that Chris mentioned. And one of those triggers was a long-term power purchasing type arrangement or model. And with Bristol City Council, we are looking at the ability of being able to see through some sleeving if there is a way of accelerating community domestic schemes by having a long-term buying scheme for the power. So there are some good things on the horizon which might help, and also the 2 supplier model for the Ofgem and code reviews for that, which may mean you can tie in a supplier for a bit longer as well, as something coming down the track. So the Chris's triggers may come to fruition within the next few years if we're lucky.
Thank you very much, Sonya. I'm just going to direct one more question. I know there's been quite a lot of chat about kind of larger scale community solar, but I think I'm going to leave that to the chat. Please do respond to those. But there was a specific question relevant to this really hard nut of domestic rooftop solar, with somebody asking, what do you think this was Paul Cowley asking what might have been the maximum acceptable price to homeowners, and you're directing that to, I think it could be Liz or it could be Chris. This could be relevant too, because that's in terms the maximum acceptable price for installing that basic solar PV.
From our experience, I think we were probably more of the kind of hit it and hope sort of model of trying something, and I think we got lucky in the sense that the price point that we reached was very attractive very quickly. And so the first few people who came forward, I'm really, they were waiting for a price point that seemed nice. And we knew that this was competitive compared to just the general market price for PV. There was a decent enough saving. So I think that it was something that people were comfortable with, and then more people kept coming forward, and it was one of those, well, people seem to be responding to this price signal, so we'll just carry on. We have in the past year or late last year, we did just do a kind of recce just to make sure that it was still competitive. because what we didn't want to do was then be promoting a price that was above and beyond where the market should be. To be honest, that then this year has kind of, we've lost our focus on it slightly because the scheme has kind of slowed down with COVID. So yeah.
If I can just say thank you very, very much to everybody on the panel. I think we've reached our time limit on this session. We've got this action-packed session today, and this is now in theory the break, restarting at 2:20. I think that there's still a bit of rumbling around on price levels. Was that John Taylor who put the question in about another question for Liz on pricing? Do you want to unmute yourself, and we could have a little bit more discussion during the break while everybody else goes off and makes themselves a cup of tea.
Hi, John here. I'm not sure I did ask a follow-up question. I think it might have been addressed in the chat earlier. But was that including that, the 3750 price?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Yeah, I can comment a little bit more about the Solar Together stuff if people like, because I've been involved in that from a council point of view. It's something that quite a few councils are now backing as an extension of the kind of bulk buy approach they were doing for like just energy tariffs. So it's I think it's targeting a section of the market, so it's not the early adopters but people that have been mulling about doing renewables for quite a while, but they're just not progressing because they're waiting on perhaps a bit more reassurance or trust in the prices in the system. So having something that has the backing of a local authority is seemed as just an extra bit of reassurance that may drive the next wave of uptake, particularly as we no longer have the feed-in tariffs to drive installations at the moment. So it's run on a quarterly basis, and basically people on a kind of county area are given the opportunity to register an interest, and then if people have let's say you've got several thousand householders interested, that's then put out to the market, and then both local and national installers have the opportunity to bid for that work. Then an installer is chosen for that particular quarter or delivery period. Offer letters are sent out to the householder, and then they are offered and they're given the chance to either say yes or no to that installation price. As far as I know, it doesn't come with any other finance offers backed up there. There could be an opportunity there, I think, for community energy sector involvement, both on the promotion side and perhaps on the financing side. But yeah, it's certainly driving uptake in the post-FIT world, and yeah, I think there's an opportunity to still improve the quality of installs going through that sort of process as well. But yeah, it's coming in higher than the prices I've heard today.
Thank you very much, John. I just want to say that John Hall from Community Energy England is about to send round a poll, if he hasn't already, to ask, there's obviously a lot more that could be said on this topic. If you're interested in this sort of nitty-gritty discussion, do respond to that poll. And I think that I understand that Community Energy England will be able to identify who said yes, so could use that as the basis of continuing this sort of discussion going forwards. So vote away on that one. And we're now at 2:20, so I would like to move on to electric vehicle charge points. Whistle stop tour this afternoon. Thank you very much, all of those of you who've come back from a mini break. We will give you a mini break at the end of this, the charge points as well. So again, ask questions in the chat, and we will be watching those, and we'll pull them out in the discussion session. Apologies to people whose question doesn't quite get to the top of the panel's list, but maybe that can be taken forward in the sort of either in the chat or in the working groups afterwards. So I'd like to introduce Catherine Allenson from NADA Community Energy and Damien Toe from Brighton Energy Co-op, both of whom have been doing work within the Next Gen programme on electric vehicle charge points from different angles. So over to you, Catherine.
Can everybody see the screen?
Yes, see the screen and hear you. That's great.
Perfect. Okay, that's good. So this is us. This is a joint presentation today. This is Brighton Community Energy and Nada Community Energy Tisbury Electric Car Club. We're both here as a result of pilots which have been very kindly funded by Power to Change, administered by the Centre for Sustainable Energy. And the idea is to develop business models for innovation and portfolio adaptation after the demise of the feed-in tariff. So Bristol is investigating what level of, sorry, I'm just switching slides. Why isn't that working for me? There we go. That's okay. Found the button. Bristol Energy is in Bristol Community Energy is investigating what level of electric vehicle charging usage will provide enough additional revenue to make community-owned PV viable post the feed-in tariff. And I'm sure Damien will go into more detail, but basically they're looking at the times people charge their vehicles, the behavior of people, the state of the batteries, and how that combines with PV generation itself. And they're looking at 6 different installation sites. And tech is looking at a sustainable networked business model for shared electric vehicle use. So we're focused more on the cars and demonstrating it in the form of a club in which people take out membership, and we're targeting hard to reach rural area and being inclusive as well with regards to fuel poverty. And the idea is to communicate and collaborate with other community energy groups who are already in the process of setting up. We're already on Facebook and Twitter, and we all have websites because communication with your local community is absolutely vital, as everybody knows. So we're taking the community with us and have done a demand assessment across our community. We've reached out to them on their thoughts on pricing, and we've asked for sponsorship as well to keep the businesses involved. They've got skin in the game, they're more likely to still continue playing with you. And also feeling the pain of our journey along the way helps people realize that what we're trying to do is something positive for the whole community. So why EVs? Why EV charge points? They save money. An electric vehicle will save money in the long run. The negative of that is that it pushes people into more cars. So we have to look at this as part of mobility rather than just vehicle use. Before I hand over to Damien for the next little section, could I just do a quick poll and ask people if you could navigate to the participants icon at the bottom and open your participants list. You'll then be able to raise your hand. It's the little icon just underneath the list of names. Could you let us know, with regards to vehicle charge point infrastructure, is your community energy group or the group you're working with, have you already completed an EV charge point installation? Or are you starting to work on that process? Or are you just considering it and haven't started it? So if anybody's just sort of on the brink of doing this, perhaps you could raise your hand. Are we seeing many hands go up there? Just to get a gauge of where the people are at. Maybe Mary, you can shout out how many people have their hands up.
I'm just trying to look at how I can see quite a lot of hands up.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Yep. Thank you very much. And then the second question is, are you looking at setting up a shared vehicle club as part of your portfolio diversification? So if you want to keep your hand up, if you're in that bracket, and if you're at the start of that journey, keep your hand up. And the reason for my question is we want to reach out to you afterwards. So with Damien and with Community Energy England, we'll be reaching out to you at some point in the not too distant future. So Damien, over to you. Thanks.
Thanks, click. Catherine. Just a slight correction. We're Brighton, not Bristol. We're the smaller relative. But actually, just an interesting point is tomorrow is our 10th anniversary. So we started a bit earlier than 10 years ago, but our official founding of the organisation was 10th of November 2010. So we would be having a big party, but we're just going to have a big press release, I think, in reality. And since then, we've installed 3.2 megawatts of rooftop PV. It's now getting to, I call it fourth bridge stage, though I think actually the fourth bridge doesn't need continually repainting anymore. But we've got to the point where there's seldom a time where there's not something going wrong, or one of the arrays needs maintaining, cleaning, and inverters gone off, etc., which is a bit painful, but it also, well, it's a job opportunity. It gives us enough work. And I guess it's a sort of a measure of success that we perpetually have something to do. And we've got a few more PV arrays that we're aiming to install before the end of March, due to the ongoing extension of the FIT, which is, well, yeah, good news for us. So I think you want to take me to the next slide, do you, Catherine?
Yep, I've done that. Yeah.
Oh, is it this one, top line installation process? Yes. Okay. So yeah, the end-to-end lead time can be quite complex for for EV installs. As Catherine mentioned, we're looking at installing 10 EV charging points attached to our existing PV arrays. So a whole variety of different types of location, different use cases as we term them. Some are workplace for staff, others are destinations like leisure and retail locations like football clubs or museums, even a vineyard where we're putting EV charging points. So there's sort of on the left-hand side of the timeline, it's getting permission from the landowner, local council, etc., finding an installer, getting permission from your network operator. I think in most instances there isn't, well, you need to get permission from the network operator, but there isn't likely to be a grid upgrade needed for like a 7 kilowatt charge point. The legal aid point, yes, we've gone around the houses somewhat with the legal agreements in place. And actually, I know Sonya's involved today, and I have to acknowledge her contribution in that she volunteered a couple of months ago to pull together a license for EV charging points, which pro bono as well, which is even more welcome, but it's available to the whole of the community energy sector. And I've basically got the draft for that, and we're using it with the University of Brighton for our first sites. And it's so much simpler than the more complex lease agreement that we were trying to use. So yeah, and then sort of transitioning over to the right hand side of the slide, you've engaged with the DNO, you've engaged with the site, do a site survey, got an installer lined up, and then it's a case of putting the kit in the ground. As with so much, I suppose it's not just in the renewable sector, but IT sector probably, and many other infrastructure type installations. The real work, which is the people that go on the roofs or who are the electricians and put the kit in the ground or put the kit on the roof, usually takes 1 day for an EV charging point or 5 days for a PV array. The people that sit at desks and push emails and paper around like me takes months. So yeah, it's always quite amusing actually how long it takes to get to put the kit in the ground, and then often it just operates for years into the future. So yeah, on the far right hand side of the slide, it's talking about the back end software and operating of the charge points, telematics, etc. We haven't actually got to the point of understanding too much about the back end software, other than we've bought 10 pod point charge points, which are actually still sitting in storage, but we're hoping to have installed some of them before Christmas. And then actually, once we've got the kit in the ground, we'll understand a bit more about the software side of things. And there's probably people on the call today that know a bit more about it, but actually, are there methods of encouraging people to move on? Like they sent a text from the software when their car's charged up, saying, "Please could you move your car because somebody else wants to charge now." So yeah, just on to the next slide.
Damien, if I can just say you're just over halfway through, 8 minutes.
Oh, okay, great. Sorry. So pitfalls and puzzles. Well, I won't read them all out, but basically there's a myriad of chargers available. There's lots of different technology types, lots of companies involved in the sector. The smallest chargers, which is sort of typical we might have at home or on lampposts, are about 3 kilowatts. We bought some 7 kilowatt chargers, but actually in the few months since we decided to buy 7 kilowatt, we're thinking we might swap out a couple for 22. The key question actually around charge points is it's not just what the charger can deliver, it's what the car can receive. So you might have a high spec charger, but if the car can't receive that level of kilowatt hours, then there's it's not actually that useful to have a really high capacity charger. But typically fast are 7 to 22, and then rapid 55 or 50. Do we need new electricity supply? That can be very, very costly. Understanding the software system is one of the other considerations I talked about earlier. For me, the most important things is actually the cost of the earthworks. So the install, the electrical side of things is fairly predictable. But if you have to dig up a car park or dig up concrete, that can be thousands of pounds. So we're actually choosing locations with a soft dig, so digging up earth effectively, or just going through a wall. The legal side of things I mentioned. There's a choice of a lease or a license, and yeah, I think the license model is much more practical, a simpler solution. The commercial benefit to the landowner, so what's in it for them? Basically, we're going to offer 50% net revenue share, or net profit share. Net profit rather than net revenue. So if we were charging 25p per kilowatt hour, they pay 13, 14p per kilowatt hour for electricity. There might be 5p each in it. I'm not going to go too much into the detail of the right hand side of the slide because I'm probably running out of time, but it was talking about staffing and the installer working with people that have done this before. It took us 2 years from the original idea for Brighton Energy Co-op to actually install something in the ground, well, not in the ground, on the roof. It's taken us a year to almost quite get to the point of installing EV charging points. Learning curves, a hell of a lot slower than doing something that you've done many times over. Just on the how long a vehicle can be charged and what capacity you get. So a 7 kilowatt charge point for 10 minutes gives you 2 miles of range. 22 kilowatts gives you 10 miles. So basically the way I see it is the fatter the pipe, the quicker the battery gets charged up. So that's the sort of capacity side of things. I referred to at the bottom that Brighton Council, working with Electric Blue, is charging, I think it's now 26p, not 25p, so a standard price across at least 200 charge points. On the question of cost, these are the costings that Catherine's broken down for looking at EO charge points. And it can be between £4,000 and £8,000. You can see the biggest figure there is the labour, and that really depends on how much concrete, tarmac, etc. has to be dug up. We have purposely chosen locations where you can actually just put the parking bay is right next to a grid connection or a distribution board to really reduce that cost, because you think there's not much usage of charge points at the moment. Obviously there will be over time, but if you then put in £2,000 or £3,000 pounds more cost for that charge point, the payback period will be 30 years. I'm just saying a figure off the top of my head, but the location of the charge point both for usage, but also for connection to the electrical supply is the most important. But why should we be interested? Well, you know, we can see some of these statistics that for the UK government targets of, I'm not sure when that's by, 50 to 70% of EVs, so probably 2030, 2035 end of combustion engine sales, there's hundreds of thousands of charge points needed. Obviously, lots of organisations are rolling them out, local authorities in the public sector. There's lots of charge points at motorway service stations, but I think there still is a niche for community energy, probably as the same sort of niche for PV and renewables owned by community energy. You know, you've got to choose your right location that's underserved by the local authority or by commercial operators. And, you know, Daniel, who I know is going to be on the panel discussion, is probably very used to those sort of, you know, more rural areas that are underserved by infrastructure. And that will be the sort of niche location for community energy to own EV charging, sorry. And yeah, the bottom. Sorry, Catherine, you picking up the next slide, are you?
Yeah, I'll
Okay.
jump back in. So I don't really need to explain to everybody on this call about the power in the community, but it's true, and Bristol Energy Network made that point right at the outset of this event. So I will draw out three examples though. The first is ZapMap, which is a private sector company, and they share knowledge with anybody freely about the size of the charge point, whether it's free and how far away it is from you. Their revenue model is based on that open network. And just to let you know that they were bought out by Good Energy last year, who now control a 50.1% stake in that company, which is a startup and started literally 18 months before. So the power of freely available data has meant that they have accelerated at a phenomenal rate, as you can see from the map on the left. The second is to introduce Charge My Street. Damien already mentioned, and Daniel and Adi have been fantastic to work with. They are installing 200 charge points across the country under a Innovate UK grant, and we've collaborated with them, and we've managed, because of that collaboration, to extend the number of charge points that we can install from 1 to 3, and to increase the capacity. So we're able now to install fast chargers instead of just the regular charge points because of that collaboration. And in fact, we had one installed on Friday and the other ones are going in today. So that's kit and ground. So we've done the months of paperwork, and I thank them for their ease of communication, and they'll be on the call to answer questions afterwards. The third is...
Catherine, two minutes.
Yeah, that's fine. So the third example and the last slide is our own example of our business model, which relies on us to collaborate with other community energy groups who want to start a car club and want to put charge points in the ground. In this era of AI-enabled technology, we will provide a shared back-end system which is tailored for each individual club. By clubbing together, we can also really bring down the cost of insurance and perhaps even of vehicles. We're not at the vehicle stage yet, but we've secured an insurance package, which was extremely difficult to get for new car clubs. The insurers are not keen on taking them on. Most importantly, the backend gives real access to existing car clubs all across the UK. So you save time like this today on learning, sharing resources, as Damien mentioned, with the lease policy, and will help you manage the club as per your geographical requirements. So, you know, you might have business to business users using any vehicles during the day, and then members of the community in the evenings and the weekends. It provides your complete analytics. It tells you how safely people are driving, how fast they're driving, how much charge there is in the car, so on and so forth. And the great point of it is, by becoming a member of TEC, you gain access to all of this, which increases the value in your own business. So by networking together, we can create the return on investment that is required to make a solution like this work. We're testing it still, and we're still in the pilot stage, but things are looking good so far. And Gus is also on the call. If you'd like to contact either Gus or myself to discuss becoming a member with us, as we're a tiny little bit ahead of the curve, that steep learning curve, then please contact us via Community Energy England or by Power to Change, or here are the details. And we're open for questions, of course. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Catherine and Damien. Exciting stuff happening there, both on just on the charge point installation point of view and from the point of view of establishing a community car club. I've noticed there are a couple of other car club practitioners in the audience. Just before we get onto them, I wanted to see whether Daniel or Adi from Charge My Street wanted to say a few words about how your model differs from what Damien and Catherine have been doing.
Daniel here from Charge My Street. So we're a community benefit society based in Lancaster. We just focus on charge point design, build and operation. Charge points in at the moment. A community share offer a couple of years ago, which got us going. We did another one earlier this year, which was fully subscribed. So we see there's a huge amount of interest in EV charging points financed by community investment. And there's a sort of link between the city energy sector and EV charge points. But I think, as you know, as Damien showed on the slides, there's quite a lot to get your head around going through the installation process. So hopefully, you know, we've gone through quite a lot of that pain, and we can work with others to try and save you having to make those mistakes over again as well.
Thank you very much, Daniel. So we've got Daniel and Sonya, Damien and Catherine on the panel. I think it was interesting hearing both Susan Ross and Bob Sherman in the chat were saying that they had tried kind of EV car clubs. Can I call on Bob first? You said that you tried a car club, but now you've got EVs, but you're using them for social benefit, is what you said in the chat. I'm not quite sure what that means. Would you like to say a little bit about that?
Yes. We teamed up with eCar Club in 2015, I think, we got a grant basically from Department for Transport to start a car club, and that provided about half the capital required, and eCar Club were happy to put in the rest. So we got a car club, we got 2 cars. Everybody thought it was a brilliant village idea, lots of support, lots of people joined, steady stream of people joining. But the fact is, the village really isn't big enough to support it. We knew it might not be, but because eCar Club were willing to take a punt, we went along with them. We're very excited by it. The fact is that in a village community like ours, everybody's got 2 cars probably, if not 3. So they'd only join just in case their car broke down, which wasn't really what we had in mind. We wanted them to sell the second car and use the electric cars. I think part of it was all about range anxiety, because these were first generation cars, so kind of 80, 90 miles Renault Zoes. We've kept 2 cars. We now don't work with eCar Club. They were bought up by Europcar, who soon sussed that we weren't making any money and very politely kicked us into touch by mutual agreement. But we teamed up with a commentary company called Electric Zoo. So we now rent 2 cars from them, which we use to provide free transport to people referred to us because they are elderly or in need, low incomes, that sort of thing. And we also take stuff to the food bank every week in them. Of course, under COVID-19, all of that has to stop. We still have our costs, but we can't really take any passengers until all that's over. So that was the car club. We've kept those 2 cars, and out of that has come our EV charging point scheme, which is we completed an RCF stage 1 grant aided process. So we have a really good feasibility study, which I'm happy to share with anybody. And we've just successfully applied for a stage 2 grant to get us business ready. The only thing we haven't got is the money to put it all in.
Thank you very much. So again, lots of learning that to be shared there. And Susan from Derwent Valley Car Club, you say you've been running a solely EV car club in the Northeast for over 7 years. So is there anything that you'd like to add to what you've heard?
Hi, yeah, we've been up and running for 7 years now, and we're working with Daniel on Charge My Street through an Innovate UK project to expand our car club into another couple of communities in the Northeast, and we're hoping to potentially expand beyond that as well, if we're lucky and get some more funding to help us do that. We're a very small based rural car club, and I think that's kind of where our niche lies to a degree, because I think we've managed to find a very low-tech model that works in our relatively small community. Part of the expansion is to make that work in slightly larger communities as well. So it'll be kind of interesting to see, kind of as we develop further, how we can take that into more rural areas across the Northeast, because what we have found is, since working on the Innovate UK project and trying to expand, with the impact of COVID, that really seems to have generated more interest in community-owned car clubs across the area as well. So we've had a lot more communities come to us to say, actually, how can we develop the same sort of thing that you deliver in our area, both within the Northeast, but wider than that as well. So it's quite an exciting time, I guess, for car clubs. But I think a little bit like Bob said, you've got to be quite careful in terms of what you develop and make sure that it's really needed in your community, because I know I remember speaking to Bob a very long time at a conference, and it is very different, you know, for every area, you know, and it's very easy to apply a car club in a city model where you've got people that don't necessarily want a car parked on the drive or don't have a drive to access it and all that sort of thing. It works very easy there. In a rural area, it's much more difficult, because obviously people are tied to their vehicles because of poor transport, mobility issues, deprivation costs. There's a whole raft of different things that go along with it. So it is a very different model. And like I say, it's something that we've been working with for quite a long time now. And it's a very low cost model as well, though. So with ours, there are not big profits in it. So it has to be done on a very community basis. And that's kind of key to it, kind of cooperatively owned and working with local communities.
Great, thank you very much. I mean, I think if I can throw that back to Catherine, I think it's a catch-22, because you're looking at car clubs in Nadder, as I understand it, at a car club because it's rural, because transport is an issue, but the density of transport demand is such that it makes the economics challenging. Do you want to say anything about that, Catherine?
Yes, look, it does make the economics very challenging, and there is a critical thing here, that rural areas are the majority in geography, but the minority in density, as you've outlined. So the only way we can do it is by scaling through collaborations with other car clubs. And whilst it's absolutely fabulous, and it's you feel like you know, you're part of a community, your local network gives you strength. But it's only in a national network that we can make the return on investment, which is why this webinar and your facilitation at Community Energy England and Scotland and Wales is so important, because by collaborating together, we achieve the scale necessary to make these clubs work in the hard to reach rural areas. It's fundamental to our business model. And in fact, we are also reaching out not only to community energy groups. We have another like-minded, not for-profit collaboration on the side as well, which we think will tip the balance for us. But our initial outreach is to community energy groups, because they understand us. We are part of a community energy group, and this is as a result of the feed-in tariff, you know, sort of wavering. So if we can encourage anybody here to just start the conversation. That's all. That's the first step, is start the conversation, and through working together, we'll get there. If they can do it in Europe, we can do it here. we're following in their coattails at the moment. Let's face it.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Just seeing in the chat, I can see that somebody, Bob Sherman, is offering to share his feasibility study, and one or two people have been asking about electric bikes. If I can point that to you, Damien, have you thought about electric bikes, electric scooters in Brighton at all?
I'm a very keen cyclist, but no, not particularly. But also, well, I suppose there's two questions there. The question of charging them, where actually the capacity of the battery is such that you could charge them at home. So I don't think there's necessarily a, and you know, even if you live in an apartment, if it's an electric scooter, you can carry it upstairs. And you know, I haven't got one, so maybe I'm talking somewhat speculatively, but you can charge it on your own. You know, plug in the wall. Yes, I don't know. The whole shared bike model, there's been a bit of a boom and bust with lots of Chinese companies effectively dumping bicycles, and you know, some cities removing those fleets of bikes. So yeah, I don't know too much about the opportunity for electric scooters, and the legislation seems to be changing to allow them on the road. So I don't know where we're at with that. So I'm not really particularly an expert on that, other than thinking, you know, they seem to be a very, as long as the safety concerns of where people ride them is addressed, they seem to be a very low carbon way of transporting yourself around a city. You know, much more efficient, and so much less metal and plastic to move around than, you know, driving to work for a short distance.
Yeah, and I see that Councillor Hall has clarified he meant electric mopeds, so rather than bikes. But
right,
yeah. Alex in the chat is saying, what about a community energy urban car club in London? I think we've got Andre Pino on the call from in the meeting from Repowering London, and I know that you might be interested to say something about EV charge points in London. Not sure if that extends to car clubs, but Andre, can we give you the floor for a minute?
Andre doesn't seem to be here at present. He was earlier, I think, though.
Okay, great. So in that case, I wanted, if I
could jump in on the electric motorbike one, because we people charging their electric motorbikes at our charge points already. It's it's a new thing that's starting to take off. Quite pleased to see EV charge points can be used to extend the range for people who are making visits out into rural areas. They are quite, it's something that's quite small at the moment, but there are growing numbers of electric motorbikes out there. I think when it comes to electric bikes, there's a whole multitude of different connecting cables, which makes it very difficult to have like a standard electric bike charger. And the economics are against you as well, because as Damien said, you can plug it in at home quite easily. So people aren't likely to want 20p over their existing home electricity supply costs to actually charge up an electric bike. There are charging stations for electric bicycles going in, so it may well be the sort of thing that happens here in the future.
Thank you very much, Daniel. So clarifying that an EV charge point can be used by electric mopeds or scooters. I had a question for Sonya, knowing some of the issues that the next gen groups have been wrestling with on insurance for EV charge points and for car club vehicles. Is that, I know you've done some very useful work on the license for EV charge points, but have you done any thinking about insurance responsibilities for charge points?
Yeah, I think it's something which, you know, very much has to be considered, and that's my cuckoo clock that always chooses the moment I decide to speak to go off. And it just, insurance, it will depend, you know, there's a number of dependencies on looking at the insurance requirements for the charge point, and depending on where it's situated, whether, you know, you're looking at community building on street, or private land, and how that facility is currently insured, and whether that can be incorporated within the landowner's own insurance, and then if it can't, insurance provision for anything which happens in relation to the supply of that charge to the vehicle that's charging from it as well. So there is a checklist of things really to look at on insurance, and I know a number of insurance providers are able to help with it, but it is quite a complex one, particularly in relation to liability for the charge being supplied to the vehicles. And I think if we're looking legally at the charge point, when we're looking at charge points, I think legally the three main things to cover off are the land ownership, obviously, the grid, as Damien mentioned, not always an issue but can be, and the supply. Ofgem have produced a really useful guide on the supply of electricity, and the provisions on what constitutes supply and resale, and where you're getting the electricity for the charge point for. So, and there's some useful guides out there, but it's one which really needs to be legally thought through as to electricity points and metering as well. So, and obviously I'm happy to help answer any specific questions.
Bob has just asked a clarification question in the chat. Are there any specialist insurers worth knowing about? I don't know if that's one for you, Sonya, or for Catherine or Damien.
Well, I've been talked to where I've been talking is to a number of brokers who will then speak to the providers on the terms. I know C.H.E.E.S.E have been doing some work and have been very useful, and obviously very used to the community model. So I would always approach them as one of my first portal calls.
Just to add to that, our insurer we've used for 5 or 6 years is C.H.E.E.S.E, and I haven't had final costs from them because we haven't actually got to the stage of the installation, though we're very close. But yeah, I'll be getting quotes from them. And it's clearly a consideration of who's going to pay for the insurance. You know, is it the landlord? Is it the charge point operator? Probably going to be the charge point operator, but you have to consider that in terms of the first couple of years. You might not be getting much revenue, so is it going to be a loss leader because of these external costs like insurance? So it all goes into the business model.
And
yeah.
Sorry,
I just wanted to add on one point. Insurance has been a huge issue for the cars themselves in this, I would say, more tricky environment that we're operating in now. But we finally managed to get a good and broader deal that we can offer more widely at TEC. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Catherine. And Jackie Jones was asking in the chat that she'd be interested to see usage figures on rural EV charge points, thinking that most people might charge at home and do relatively short trips. I'm going to direct that question to Damien, because it's not a kind of car club question, it's almost a kind of private EV ownership question. Do you want to just say a bit about your thinking on which types of locations work for community-owned charge points?
Yeah, I suppose it's like any infrastructure. You've got to be confident of the usage levels of it. I'll let Daniel add on the end of anything I say, because actually he's got practical experience of doing it, whereas mine's still a bit theoretical. But because the locations we've chosen are where we've already got PV arrays, and a few of those are in rural areas, but mostly around the sort of periphery of Brighton. And yeah, so our limitation, or the fixed constraint, is the fact that we have a PV array there, and then we're going to install charge points and see how much of the electricity from the PV is used in charging. the next phase would be effectively learning from that and working out the business model and all the parameters, and what level of usage and what level of price point for the per kilowatt hour is likely to make post fit renewables viable, which was really the question we're looking at. So then we'd have to look at the kinds of locations that that made sense. And learning from Bob's experience, if you're in a rural community or an affluent rural community that's got 2 or 3 cars per household, if they're not EVs, then they're not going to be using the charge point. So there's some background research really that needs to be done on at what point there's enough market effectively for your assets. I don't know if Daniel's got anything further from his own experience, but it's I think from a couple of conversations I've had, the charge points don't pay themselves off at the moment. 4 or 5 years revenue at least is needed. So you've got to be sure of where you put them.
Thanks, Damien. Daniel, do you have anything to add? Because you're looking at all sorts of locations for charge points, aren't you?
Yeah, in particular, the rural charge points are really interesting. Which have got 2 different use cases. So on the one hand, the tourists who are coming in, visiting an area, who want to charge up for a stay. And then on the other hand, people who are living in terraced houses or flats in the centre of villages who may not be able to charge point outside their house where they live, but they could use that sort of communal charge points. So it's how we bring both of those 2 use cases together. Another really interesting one we're working on at the moment with some of the local authorities is using vehicle to grid in some rural locations to provide resilience for community centres. So this is where if there's a flood or cut, people will go to one of these resilience centres in a village hall or church hall, and they can get a hot drink, they can charge their phone up using the power from the EV, which is plugged in outside. So you can imagine 364 days of the year, that charge point is used by electricity, charge up people's vehicles. On the one day of the year when the power goes off because there's been a big storm, these can then put power back into the hall and help to support the community. And I think we recognise different ideas. You need to think quite imaginatively to provide these services in rural areas. Just going into it saying, yeah, we're going to do exactly the same as we do in the centre of a city, that's just not going to cut it. It's about thinking differently.
Thank you very much, Daniel. So I think I'm seeing some good suggestions about not just NatureServe, but Bruce Stevenson as a friendly insurer for renewable energy coming up in the chat. I think we're pretty much bang on target for 3:05. We were aiming to complete this session. So I wanted to say thank you very much to Sonya, to Daniel, Damien and Catherine, and everybody else who's contributed to this session. John will send round a poll again asking, is anybody interested in continuing these sorts of discussions through a working group or forum on EV charge points and or car clubs after the call. So please do, if you want to continue. We can't cover every issue in a session as short as this. And as entertainment, while useful information while you take a break, Alex Hartley from C.H.E.E.S.E and Crew in London is going to just say a few words about some of the initiatives they're doing now.
We seem to have lost Alex as well. Maybe there's something up with London's internet today. But she was interested to let everybody know about an event that I will put in the chat shortly. Goodness, the chat has been busy today. I will share that whilst you all get a cuppa. And thank you for filling in this poll. That's very useful.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, John. Hello, everybody. Well, welcome back from the break. For the third topic we're discussing this afternoon, the third and final, we're going to be talking about heat pumps, what community energy groups can do in relation to heat pumps. So I would like to introduce our speaker, Jonathan Atkinson from the Carbon Co-op, who will give us some pointers on potential, the pitfalls and opportunities provided by heat pump project. I should say that Carbon Co-op has a project which is supported by NextGen, but the work that's being that Jonathan's talking about here, people powered retrofit, is I think one of the BEIS retrofit pilots, isn't it? It isn't actually the NextGen work. Thank you very much, Jonathan.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mary. And yeah, although the genesis of this work is from the BEIS retrofit work, I should say there are crossovers with our NextGen project, which is essentially about data and data. It's called Energy Data Cooperative, and I'll talk about it in a sec. But ability to bring in data from heat pump performance and potentially to optimize and control heat pumps centrally is like a very exciting area and a big opportunity for us and other people as well. So Carbon Co-op, our experience on heat pumps. So we're not heat pump engineers ourselves, although we work with heat pump engineers and installers, and I'll talk a bit about the dynamic as we go on. But in terms of our experience of heat pumps, we have members. We've got 260 members at the moment, and a number of them have heat pumps. One in particular, Andy Hamilton, is very keen to share his experience around the use of heat pumps, and he's an engineer and academic. We've also recently went over to Ireland to Super Homes run by Tipperary Energy Agency, and they're doing mass installation of heat pumps as part of whole house retrofits. And there's loads of very interesting, fascinating data there. Also running some useful courses. And we've also, over the summer, been running courses and webinars and what have you for installers, for householders, for all sorts of people. So yeah, we're really involved in heat pumps. And as part of People Powered Retrofit, which is our whole house domestic retrofit service, where it's an end-to-end service for helping householders from just interested in retrofit all the way through to design, specification, building. A fair number of them are involved with heat pump installations. Very briefly, there's a chain to People Powered Retrofit, from advice, making a plan, design, development, procurement, on-site and handover. And part of this system involves the heat pump kind of process maps onto this, and I'll share that later in the presentation. So why aren't more people installing heat pumps? Well, there's not enough installers. The installations have not been good quality to date, and there's not enough demand. In terms of installers, there's certainly skills gap out there, and there's the need for training and more specific bits of training, which I'll talk about. There has to date been poor quality installations, and we've seen that as a consumer-facing organisation. People come to us, they've had poor installations done, and we'll talk about MCS as a kind of accreditation system, but it's no guarantee of quality necessarily. We've had one MCS installation that is extremely poor quality. So yeah, maybe a bit more of an opportunity to get things rectified though. And there's not to date been demand. Certainly people don't really understand what heat pumps are, how they can operate in their homes, how they might replace a gas boiler. But that is now changing. And certainly over the summer, we've seen a huge amount of interest from householders in how can we get rid of our gas boiler and get a heat pump? Where do we start? What do we do first? So that is very much changing. So I'm going to cover domestic heat pumps today. I'm going to focus mainly on air source heat pumps, but there's a lot of overlap with the other types, mainly ground source. But I'm not going to talk about communal. So there are instances where community energy organisations are exploring communal shared loop schemes where a number of houses tap into the same heat loop, sort of like a small heat network. I'll talk about things to look out for, what's in a heat pump, how heat pumps are designed and installed. We're going to talk at the end about opportunities for community energy. I'm going to say necessarily a lot of this stuff gets really technical and really detailed, and I'm going to try and skate that line between sharing some of the technical stuff but not going too much into it. I'm not an engineer. I may well get things wrong. I may well get terminology wrong, and I do apologise for that, because I know some people are very detailed orientated around that sort of thing. So if I get it wrong, I get it wrong. What I would say as well is there's loads of documentation out there online if people are interested in exploring this stuff further. But in very vague terms, without going into too much detail, a heat pump is like a reverse fridge. Okay, and let's say it works on that basis that if you compress air, if you compress a balloon in your hands, it'll get hot. And essentially, there's a bit of physics going on there where there's heat produced, let's say, by compression. So in a heat pump, you're drawing from a heat source, and that might be air, it might be water, it might be the ground. You're drawing it in, you're compressing, you're extracting heat, and you're using that heat to heat a house. Yeah. So there's different things going on here, technical things, but that's essentially the thing. And there's different elements involved. Yeah. There's the unit itself and the heat pump unit and where it goes, and there's an indoor element sometimes as well, and a buffer tank sometimes. Yeah, for heat transfer. Expansion vessel. There's a hot water cylinder. I think for me, in terms of thinking about space and where these things go, you need some space outside, you need some space inside, like sort of a boiler cupboard but bigger, but you also need a space for a hot water tank as well. And I know we've maybe spent the last 10 or 15 years telling people to get rid of the hot water tanks, so I do apologise for that, but that's that. In terms of heat pumps, you're generating a heat and you can store it in a hot water cylinder. But there's also interesting integration into renewables as well, both to power the heat pump and also potentially to dump heat into a hot water stove from solar PV. Okay, let's just navigate a couple of terms. And the real, I think if there's only one term you come away with, it's about coefficient of performance, COP. This is the measure of how effective the heat pump is at extracting heat. And the things that go into this calculation are the amount of electrical energy you put into the heat pump. So you're essentially using the electrical energy to power the fan, which extracts the heat. And you're measuring the amount of heat that you're able to extract. So the coefficient of performance, as you can see in that little diagram, you're putting 2 kilowatt of energy in and you're getting 5 out. So the coefficient of performance is 2.5. It's getting 2.5 the times amount of energy out that you're putting in. And some people are like, well, that's absolute magic, you know, and that breaks the laws of thermodynamics and what have you. But what you're doing is using that electricity to extract heat from the air, so that the heat, the energy does come from somewhere. It's not some magic thing. So the coefficient of performance is something to look out for, and you look out for it in two kind of areas. One is like the promised performance that the manufacturer or the installer might promise. Say, well, we can offer a COP of 2.5 or 3 is 3.5. Those are the kind of levels of which people want to aim for. And then there's the actual measured coefficient of performance. So that's when you've installed the system and you're monitoring it and you're looking for how effective it is. Because if it's dropping below, if it's going towards 1 watt of energy put in, 1 watt of energy coming out, then it's not really working for various different reasons. So COP, coefficient of performance, is a real key indicator of performance, but also evaluation of effectiveness. You also have seasonal performance factor as well, just bottom left-hand corner there. Obviously, the performance of the heat pump can vary over time, and the outside temperature as well can have an impact on that. So it can vary over the seasons as well.
Jonathan, you're about halfway on time. Okay,
so right, well, I'm going to skate over anything, but let's skate over some stuff. Your average boiler might be 20 kilowatts. It's quite a powerful thing. Heat pumps tend to be smaller, yeah. And the amount of the temperature of the water that they're heating is generally lower. A gas boiler will be 60 to 80 degrees, quite hot. Heat pump, it's lower. It's like the water is lower. Aiming for the COP of 2.5 to 3. So what that means is if you're using standard radiators, the hotness of the radiator is going to be less, going to be giving out less heat. So you might look at the radiators, you might size them a bit bigger, you might need to replace them, you might not, depends how they've been sized already. But what it does mean as well is because you're generating less heat, you really need to reduce heat loss in the home through retrofit. So you need to insulate the home so less heat is lost. You also need to think about how you're going to generate hot water, so you've not got a boiler that's turning on, hence the idea of a hot water tank. And if you're thinking about whether a heat pump is suitable for a household, you need to think about the system together. You need to think about the existing heat source, what they're using at the moment, how efficient is it. You need to think about space heating demand, about how effective it is, whether it needs insulation or retrofit. You need to think about state. You need to think about budget, because we're talking about £5,000 to £14,000, something around that. And you also need to think about radiators, whether they need to change. So there's a whole assessment that needs to be done. In terms of the costs, in terms of things like RHI, Renewable Heat Incentive, which is available still for the time being, and I do anticipate being extended. So yeah, whether you get RHI is dependent on whether your home is insulated, the EPC. You get a grant between 6 and 12 grand over a 7-year period, calculated on those kilowatt hours, the amount of energy produced. Certain limits to the thing, but you also need an MCS accredited installer, so it has to have that accreditation. The Green Homes grant has come in, and there's some interaction with RHI. It kind of reduces the RHI available, but it's an upfront grant, so it can pay for the capital costs of the heat pump, although you do have the household that does have to put a third of the cost in. Again, it's MCS and needs to be trust marked the installer. When you're assessing a home, whether it's suitable for a heat pump, you need to think about the peak heat load. So that's the maximum amount of heat that's going to be required on the coldest day of the year. And you do that by working out individual room-by-room heat loss calculations. You can then look at the emitter sizes, the radiator sizes, and a hot water solution. This requires a detailed survey to really work out whether you need it. And after the survey and the specification, it's then about finding an installer to do the work, getting the right model and make. I have to say, they do vary to an extent, but it's not the most important thing, I would say, the make and model. Looking for the MCS registration. Commissioning is important. Once it's gone in, setting it up, making sure the householder knows how to use it. And the data and the integration of that data, being able to extract the data and understand what's going on. Things that can go wrong, compressor cycling is a key one, and under and oversizing. And that is the reason why the COP is reduced for a lot of them, and why a lot of them end up costing more. Right, I just want to end on two things. One is installer dynamics, which I think is really important and we're aware of. And the second is how this system might work for us. Now, there is a limited number of installers out there who can do this stuff. They come from plumbing, heating engineer, and some of them electricians as well. Now, the design work and the fitting are combined onto MCS. So that means that the installer will go to a house, will do the specification work, the heat loss calculations, the radiator sizing, they'll do all that, and they'll do the installation. The assessment side, the working out all the heat loss calcs, is time consuming, and it's at risk as well, because the householder might pull out after they've seen the quote, but they can't do a proper quote unless they've done all those calculations. And for me, that's the area where sometimes installers cut corners. Yeah, there's a kind of dynamic between engineer and contractor-led design. We could get engineers or retrofit assessors to do that design and specification work. Sometimes installers don't like that, they won't work with that kind of thing, but that's our way of ensuring quality. There are also manufacturer umbrella schemes that really we want to get rid of. They're where manufacturers, let's say NIBE for instance, will have a designer who sits at their head office. The installer goes out, collects information, and the calculations are done hundreds of miles away from the house by the manufacturer. That for us is very poor practice. It might be that the installer doesn't really know how the installation works very well, and that again is a key source of risk. Also, an installer, if they don't know something, they're likely to increase the size of the heat pump, specifically for that reason of peak load needing to be met. And again, we know that they work very poorly if they're oversized. So again, that's another reason why you can get poor quality installs, really. And the MCS accreditation, as I said, it's not always a guarantee, but they're in the process of splitting that into a design bit and an install bit, or a fitting bit. And it might be that the community energy can pick up on the design work. So design work is where things are falling down and where errors take place, and that's where we can get involved. So this is kind of my last slide, basically. This is those different stages of work. There's advice with householders that are just interested. There's assessments to measure up and do the calculations and to specify a size of heat pump. There's installations and getting the work done, and there's evaluation afterwards. How are the heat pumps working? Are they working as intended? Are there simple changes that can be made to improve performance? Community energy can get involved at every stage of this, I would say, except perhaps the installation phase. We can offer advice, we can do assessments, we can get involved in the design. We need an engineer for that, but it's something you can bring into an organisation. We can get involved in the monitoring and evaluation. The only bit I think is less suitable for community energy is the installation. And there are potentially a lot of installers out there, a lot of people interested in getting involved in this installation. And that's an area to farm out to. And some resources there. John Cantor is really the font of all knowledge in this, but we've got some webinars and stuff as well. So that's a very quick tour of heat pumps from my point of view. I know they're very technical, and I've skated over some of that. I've thrown some kind of phrases and jargon at you, but we do have some time now to pick up questions and what have you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Perfectly timed. Thanks for all the wealth of information in there. I'm going to introduce the rest of the panel. So as well as Jonathan from the Carbon Co-op, we've got Toby Costin and I hope Alex Hartley from CREW, certainly Toby Costin from CREW in London, one of the Next Gen programs there, and Alison Turnbull from Bath and West Community Energy. And they have both been looking at heat pumps from different angles, which I think will come out shortly. And Sonya there on hand as ever for the legal queries. Before I move on to Toby and Alex, I just wanted to put to you a couple of specific questions that came up in the chat, Jonathan. David Saunders was asking, what's the typical cost of a heat pump system? I think there was some reference to that in your slide, but if you could say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it really varies, really, depending on the size of the installation. But you're looking at something like £4,000 or £5,000 up to £14,000, £15,000, and it depends basically levels of intervention, simplicity of the house, complexity of the system involved, and that sort of thing.
And another one for you, then I'll open it up a bit and come back to some more questions at the end. But do you recommend fitting heat meters so that the actual coefficient of performance or seasonal performance factor can be calculated?
Yeah, I'd have to do some checking, but I'm pretty sure there's certain requirements around RHI, around heat meters. What we're looking at in particular is the ability to extract information and data off the system to be able to look at things like heat flow temperatures and cycling, because it's then that you're able to troubleshoot basically what's happening with a heat pump and why they may or may not be working properly.
Great, and I know that Alison and Toby have been looking at data from heat pumps in different ways. Alison, would you like to say a few words about what Bath and West has been looking at in relation to heat pumps?
Yes, thanks, Mary. Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, our Next Gen project is looking at offering flexibility from a number of technologies, and heat pumps being one of them. So we're definitely looking at it from how we can remotely control different technologies to offer flex to the local grid, doing so in a way that the householder doesn't have to compromise on their comfort or convenience, so hence the kind of automated remote control of these devices. And from a community perspective, what we're trying to look at is to see whether there's a business model to be able to offer aggregated community flex from these different technologies. So our Next Gen project is looking at installing up to 50 households with either a heat pump or an EV charge post, or indeed a hot water controller, to see how much flex that we can offer from those combined technologies, and to look at how we can control those. We're looking at it from a different angle, but you've slightly frightened me, Jonathan, by saying what you did about installers and how they might not necessarily be the best quality that you would have liked. So far, the installers we are talking to and we have been dealing with seem to have a pretty good track record. And on that point, I thought a lot of the manufacturers do require the installers to be accredited with their own training programs to be installers. And so did you not find that that accreditation was not in place for some installers?
So this is looking at the reports that have been published over the past few years, our engagement with different people as well, rather than installations we've worked on. Although in the people powered retrofit, we've got a set of key questions that we ask. One of the kind of warning flags for us is when they talk about manufacturer design, because it can mean that basically they're just schooled in that one kind of technology rather than design process as a whole. So you can, by asking the right questions, get a really good indication of how flexible they are and how the kind of their approach. And what I would always say is, like, do they do room by room heat loss calculations? Would they work with a M&E engineer? Would they be open to the input from another professional? If they kind of back away at that stage and say, no, we do our own thing, we don't want to hear from anyone else, it indicates that they're limited to certain manufacturers and limited to these umbrella schemes. So yeah, I'd be really interested to know what systems you're using that you're able to control, because that's one of the things we're looking at the moment. Which models enable control for flexibility and which don't, which lock them out, you know?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk a little bit about that at the moment, but that's a complete several-hour conversation in its own right. But briefly, we're talking to 3 main market leaders at the moment. We're looking at doing a cloud-to-cloud connectivity process with all of the 3 manufacturers. Because of that, we're having to sign an NDA with each of them, not surprisingly, because they want to keep their API not going into the public domain. You can understand that. I did ask all of the 3 manufacturers that whether I could reveal that we were working with them on this conference today, and only one, which was Daikin, said that they were happy for me to say that we're working with them. Suffice it to say, the whole cloud-to-cloud connectivity is taking a very long time. It has taken us 6 months to get NDAs signed with these 3 providers, these 3 manufacturers, and it's a very, very slow process. So we're also looking at a simpler approach, which is our plan B, which is controlling the heat pumps using thermostats. So that's our second approach. It's not as fine-tuned as working with a cloud-to-cloud approach, but I think in the short term, that's going to be the one that's going to offer us the quickest solution to be able to calculate how we can offer flex services and to build our business model. So, but I'm happy to have a sort of separate conversation with a lot more detail about how that whole process has taken a long time to even get to this point.
Thank you very much, Alison. I wonder if I could direct a question to Toby, because there are a few questions in the chat about low frequency infrared heating as possibly a solution that would work in a block of flats. And I know, Toby, that you've been looking at shared ground array shared ground source heat pumps as a possible, which is a possible solution in more communal buildings or blocks of flats. So would you like to say a little bit about what Crew's been doing?
Sure. We were looking at three areas really. One is the domestic market, and in London that's quite hard because of space, noise levels, those kind of issues. So we're kind of working through that at the moment. We're looking at civic buildings, and our first install will be at a youth centre in Battersea in January. And then we're also looking at a solution for blocks of flats, and that could be a shared ground array, it could be air source heat pumps, it could be a dual loop system, so essentially you're kind of preheating to a low level, maybe 20 degrees with a ground source or air source, and then you've got ground source heat pumps in the flat. So we're looking at a number of options there. I mean, the big thing about infrared panels compared with one is running costs. That's a one-to-one heating system, and as Jonathan's already mentioned, we're looking at 3 to 1, 3.5 to 1. So it will be much cheaper running cost wise to go with a heat pump. The other problem is if we all switch from gas to one-to-one heating, we wouldn't have enough electricity to supply it. So we do need, one, insulation to bring down the demand, but two, very efficient systems so that we're not taking too much from the grid for each kilowatt of heat that we're producing. So I think they're the factors. Sometimes, yes, if you've got a brilliantly insulated new property, infrared panels or just a modern storage heating system will probably do the job for you. But for most of us, and we're looking at retrofit, it's going to be an expensive running cost if you're doing that because of the one-to-one. I had a comment just on the should you meter or should you take the RHI? I'm just about to publish something on the chat now, but there's a new beta on the BRE's website of actual live performance of heat pumps compared with what MCS say, which is a perfectly modelled 35 degrees to 55 degrees at 7 degrees temperature. And it makes quite stark readings. So if we talk about sort of ground source heat pumps, like the Kenza shoebox is probably the biggest product in the UK. On MCS at 55 degrees, that's 277. On the BRE side, it's below 200%. So basis that, if I was going for RHI, I'd be taking just the RHI and not monitoring it. I'd take these numbers that are the modelled numbers rather than what we're seeing now. I don't know how accurate this is yet, but anecdotally the evidence we're hearing from things like Kenza is they are coming out much lower than the 310 or the 270 depending on the heat temperature you're looking at. So it's a big factor, and it's something we all need to think about when we're modelling this stuff. So it's a really interesting little page worth having a look at, and some perform closer to their MCS numbers than others.
Thank you very much. So be wary of the numbers on the tin, as it were. And that's
exactly
the kind of performance you're talking about.
Yeah, talk about the scopes really on that on the MCS website.
Yeah. Thank you, Toby. There are a couple of specific questions I might direct back to Jonathan. Tom de Simone was asking, are heat loss assessments expensive for the homeowner, and do you need much training to do them? And Daniel Heary asking, how noisy are heat pumps? Are they similar to air conditioning? Could I point those two at you, Jonathan?
Yeah. The heat loss calcs. So we work with retrofit assessors to do our domestic retrofit assessments, and some of them also specifically do heat loss calcs as part of that. If they're done properly, they take a couple of hours, and they also, as part of that, require time spent with the household on education as well. Kind of how do they use heating, how might they use it in the future. Now, I know from talking to them that they are often put under pressure to do them much quicker and much cheaper. So they often charge something like £200, £250, that sort of thing, but the installers will want them to do them cheaper, quicker, and poorer quality. So there's a bit of a dynamic there to be involved with. What we're doing, we do our whole house assessments, and they take a similar amount of time, 2 to 3 hours, and we're collecting all the data that we need to do the heat loss calculations at that same time to enable that to take place. So we don't have to do 2 visits, basically. Noise, the models vary, and also depending on where they are and if they're lifted off the ground as well. There's some reports that, you know, sometimes you can cause vibration if they're kind of next to the house. But generally, they're fairly quiet. They're permitted development, so you don't need to do a noise survey unless you're fitting them as part of a communal scheme. So, for example, housing associations, if they're doing a number in a certain area, will have to do noise surveys, and it can be time consuming and add costs, you know, to the process. But generally, they're pretty quiet.
Thank you very much. Now, one issue that I know we've talked about quite extensively within the next.
Sorry, so just 1 second. I have a slide on that just to show, if you'd be interested in seeing it, about the noise levels. So this is NEBI's 2040. Can I share it on the screen? It might be useful for people just so they can get their heads around.
John will make that happen, I think. John Hall.
Can everyone see that? So this is an EB 2040, and they've got different sizes. So the smallest one is the 6. A lot of homes, the 8 would work, otherwise the 12. So if you're right standing next to it, it's around about 54. Once you get down, say, 2 meters away, which is, it needs to be a meter from the boundary wall legally anyway, you're kind of looking at London background noise is 41 decibels. So as soon as you're a couple of meters away, you're at that kind of level. You get 6 meters away, you're kind of at, whisper is, I think, 30, 31. So that gives you an idea of where they get to. And this isn't a particularly quiet heat pump. That's probably fairly industry standard. There are quieter ones if you can find them, like Oshner. Oshner's smallest heat pump, I think, is 34 decibels standing next to it. So as soon as you move away, you're below whisper quiet on that thing. So that might be useful.
Thank you very much, Toby. Really helpful. Would you be able to put that put a link to that in the chat as well, if you can? Or
yeah, I've got it as a PNG. I think I've grabbed it off a screen at a meeting, so I can certainly send it to you to circulate, for sure.
So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Green Homes Grant. Dave Green made a comment on this, that the Green Home Grant has to be installed by the end of March, and it's getting tight. Dave, I don't know if you want to say a few words about that.
Yeah, it's just I've been dealing with a number of people who are trying to get the Green Homes Grant, and they're finding great difficulty getting suppliers because, you know, it's such a tight time frame. It's an absolute ludicrous scheme. It's another of these boom and bust government subsidies that looks good on paper, but it's going to cause a lot of problems. So if you're interested, get in there quick, because, you know, very soon installers will be saying no, they're fully booked to the end of March.
One of our installers, who probably deals with like 10 calls a week, is getting 30 to 40 calls a day at the moment.
So this is boosting the economy, but not necessarily in the best ways for heat pump installation. I wondered whether Gordon Copper had some things to say about creating a network, green network reference retrofit web section, trying to showcase the supply chain in Herefordshire and Shropshire. Gordon, would you be able to say a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's just trying not to reinvent the wheel. I mean, I've been talking to Jonathan, who's been excellent in supporting us over the past few months and before. But now, obviously, there's a local aspect in terms of listing the energy surveyors, the builders, and the installers, and so on. But in general, the format of such an information site for retrofit should be replicable by all our community energy groups around the UK. So it's just to have a discussion group up and running about what that could consist of. With useful general links. I'm sure C.H.E.E.S.E probably has a lot of information on this already, and I'm researching that at the moment. And we're trying to set it up, for example, for the Marches area for Shropshire and Herefordshire at the moment.
Great, thanks. So good ideas to follow.
But if anyone wants to share anything they've already done, which is what I'm asking for, yeah, that's great. I'm certainly leaning hard on Carbon Co-op for their information, and what they already have published is excellent. But I'm just trying to keep it, you know, it's a general public thing, and we're working with Western Power and trying to get some money off them to fund it more, but so far not so successful. But it will be successful and it will grow. So we're starting it off as an information source.
Yeah.
Mary,
thank you.
can I just add another quick point about the Green Homes Grant? Any installer for the Green Homes Grant needs to be Trustmark registered, and Trustmark have got a handy website where you can look up installers and you can put in a web address and it will then tell you all the installers within a certain radius. The problem is that there are different categories. There are lots of different categories basically for the same thing. So there's a category for internal wall insulation, there's one for external wall insulation, there's one for wall insulation brackets cavity internal and external, and if you type in the different ones you get different installers because not all the installers have signed up for all the different categories. So have a good search round and see if you can't find anybody in the category you've put in, try and see if there's another category it might come under.
Thank you very much, Dave. And I see that John Taylor has just shared some information about the Green Homes Grant skills training competition, the Green Homes Grant Training Fund, which is launching soon. Sonya, I wondered whether I've seen you put a comment on the chat about all the different heat opportunities for community energy grants, for community energy groups. Could you say, I'll give you a little bit of time to say what you want to say about that, but could you also say anything about how community energy groups can deal with the risk of signposting people towards installers who turn out not to be good? What can community groups do to ensure that households aren't let down and that community energy doesn't end up carrying the can for poor workmanship?
Sure, I think that's, it's a really important consideration, and throughout the sessions, all of the sessions today, I think there have been discussions around installers and the relationship between the community group and the installer, and as a number of groups have pointed out, Alison from BWC and others, that the contract between the homeowner, if it's domestic installation, and the installer is between those two parties and not with the community group, and which then takes the liability to the installer rather than directly to the community group. And I think it is important when looking at structures and arrangements, and I think Liz also mentioned it in relation to Frico's solar streets, is that contract relationship is kept very clean between whoever is installing the options and the group. Of course, that doesn't take away from the fact that it is the community group who is recommending that, and so there is very little we can do. The damage that would be reputational, and so it's always down to the due diligence on the installer plus accreditations and previous experience, and looking behind the installer to parent companies and financial ability of installers to carry out what they're contracting to do, with whether it's domestic or commercial, and making sure that they have that sufficient experience. And if they're a company or a manufacturer, they're not based in the UK, how the customer would be able to reach out if there was an issue following installation, because that's often one of the big problems, is actually something goes wrong later down the line, and how do we get it fixed? And so what are the terms of any warranties or operation and maintenance agreements with that installer, and how can they be enforced? But we've all been there and recommended things and found out that the installer's gone bust or has put some poor workmanship, and Jonathan mentioned that as well in relation to his heat pump. So it is very much care, but looking at that contract link is important. I just highlighted a couple because I'm involved in a number of heat pump community projects, some brand new district heating community heat schemes for retrofit projects, and also some new installations for new builds as well. And one of the things that I was considering a consult for Bristol City Council as well, and looking at the fact that community energy is a good home for district heating and long-term infrastructure, because pipe work, district heating, heat pumps will be there for a long time, and it's important that that infrastructure is kept closely managed by its community, and it's a good opportunity because community energy is bound by its nature to be in things for the long haul, so, and to look at investment over the long haul. So I think there are a lot of opportunities, although the financial models are still difficult. And I suppose one last thing I would say is they've drafted a large number of heat supply agreements now, more on the commercial, non-domestic side. There's always going to be an animal noise somewhere in my background. This time it's my puppy, but it's normally my chickens, geese, or cuckoo clock. Anyway, and the Heat Trust, and also the C.H.E.E.S.E grant funding is also available to communities for doing heat projects, and they provide a really good set of precedent documentation for heat supply, and it's very useful. We're looking at it. It is quite complex. It's not, and I'm not just saying that because all community energy legal documents are complex, but the heat supply, because it's unregulated, is even more complex at this stage. Looking forward to new regulation in that sector.
Thank you very much, Sonia. So that, did you say that was the Heat Trust, which has?
Yes, yeah, that's on for pricing for domestic heat supply. It's very important to give that protection which exists for electricity supply customers, which doesn't exist for heat supply customers in this heat pump area, because customers have to be protected from very extreme price rises, which, if we get our business models wrong as communities and suddenly find we need to charge a lot more for the heat than we were, the end consumer is going to be very much affected, even if they're getting a new green supply of energy.
I wonder whether Jonathan or Toby, do you have any insights onto the opportunities for community energy in district heating systems, as Sonia was suggesting?
I guess I don't think we're looking at that. We might look at communal systems, you know, where 100 flats or something, but not beyond that scale. I think it's just too many stakeholders to be negotiating with for it to be viable, I think, for community groups of our size.
I don't know whether we've still got anybody, James or Richard from Bristol City Council here. That might be more of a question for a local authority. Don't think we have. Okay, so I think we've got one more minute. There was some interesting an interesting comment in the chat from Mark Stadden, saying we need competence, not qualification based training, and I wondered what that would mean for the heat pump supply chain. If you wanted to say a word or two about that, Mark, before we stop.
Hi. So yeah, technical officer for Community Energy Plus down in Cornwall. I've been listening a lot recently to Beta Teach, and the chap who runs that was advocating a different approach in the way that we train installers and tradesmen, based on competency rather than explicitly qualifications, and that's based on his research into learning processes. And in summary, there is a feeling that currently in the sort of training space, the arrangements are based on sort of box ticking, very much on box ticking, and getting qualifications that way without really guaranteeing the competence, and that has impacted installations of newer technologies, particularly sort of air source heat pump, and the debacle that happened with solar thermal in the early days, and that
we as a sector would benefit greatly from a change in focus in the way that we train renewable energy installers, and so that then would obviously impact the supply chain, and hope work to the better, and provide more reassurance and confidence in the compliance with standards and installation and performance of renewable energy installations.
Thank you very much, Mark. So I think we'll need to leave it there. We're aiming to finish at 4 o'clock, and Emma is going to take back the reins. I know that just before she does that, John is going to circulate another kind of "would you be interested in joining a working group" poll that's out now. So please do sign up to that if you're interested. And I want to say a big thank you to Jonathan, Toby, Alison, Sonya, and everybody else who's been part of this final session. And thank you very much for all your contributions in the chat. It's really great to see the level of interest and sharing of learning out there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Mary. I am literally going to be 1 minute, and I'll be talking whilst the polls go on to make sure that we finish on time. I just wanted to say, on behalf of Power to Change, Next Gen and Community Energy England, thank you so much to our speakers for giving up their valuable time to share their learning. I found it absolutely fascinating, loads of learning to take away. And thanks as well to all of our delegates for taking part, all the chat. There was a lot of chat in the event, which is always fantastic. Now more than ever, we realise how valuable people's time is. So thank you, we do really appreciate it. Do check that you are signed up to our member newsletter to hear all about the latest news from across the sector. And if you're not a member, do consider joining Community Energy England. We'll be aiming to share the notes and the video recording in the next week. And all the learning will not only feed into Community Energy England, but will feed into Next Gen's programme as well. I think there's been a survey in the chat as well about feeding into the next lot of Innovation Lab webinars, which we work on with the Next Gen programme. And yeah, the other thing is really actions. So we're really keen from these events that it actually leads to something. So we'll be looking from the chat and all the discussion about what actionable steps can come out of the event. So do get in touch if there's anything else that you think we should be taking forward, and any improvements that we can make to events as well going forward. And John, I wasn't looking at the polls there, so how many polls have we got left? Have they been just going on in the background?
Last one coming up.
Brilliant. So are you likely to participate in one of our events in the future is the last poll. Brilliant. And then as those votes are coming in, we will be leaving the room open. So in our cooperators arms, which we always run at the end of events. So if anyone does want to stay, have a chat, carry on any of the conversations, because we do miss the networking from face-to-face events. But if you've had enough of sitting by a computer, then I hope you have a wonderful evening. And thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks a lot, Emma.
Thank you, everybody, and I can confirm